Good afternoon, beautiful people of the Twitter and YouTube verse that are seeing us live here. And we hope actually you also watch the show and playback. Welcome to your favorite NFL podcast that has been around for a little over a year now. And our second landmark event, if you don't count the last show, if you don't count episode 50 or the last show of 2022, fun stuff happened there. But the second landmark episode of the podcast is here of the Sports Agents of Chaos. It is our 2023 three-round NFL mock. Big times for the show, but of course, before we get to that, we need to do our usual shtick here at the start of it, including me and my, this long-running, flat, just don't know when to stop intro. So let me actually figure out a spot where to stop, and that's introducing my two co-hosts per usual.
That's where you stop.
Yes, looking like a long title on the article of some colleges that we, sometimes read. Anyways, opening the show, myself, Iceman Jurgen, joined me by my two compatriots of chaos with me on the screen to my, I believe it should be my right on everyone else's screen, but who knows with StreamYard. Justin Zuckman, Zucktails. ZGM, I don't know. I'm running out of things to say for him.
I thought you were going to make stuff up now.
I am. I mean, ZGM counts as made up.
It's solid.
Justin is here. Justin, how are we doing today?
This is one of my favorite shows of the year, man. I'm excited. I'm ready to go.
Yes. Mock draft season is always the best time of the year, especially for us. This is the second time we're doing it, and it's a fun time to say the least. But of course, we are joined by, at the bottom of the screen, he's at the bottom because he holds the two of us up because he is holding the show up on his shoulders, and who knows the enjoyment that he's going to give us with some of his mock draft selections. I'm expecting a kicker in one of these three rounds with one of his picks. But in all seriousness, Podfather Rick is here. Rick, how are we doing?
Well, you know the old saying, when there's something strange in your mock draft neighborhood, who are you going to call? Cole Kmet.
He got it. He told you people he got it.
Of course I did.
And you didn't believe him.
No. Why does anybody believe me when I say I'm going to do something? It's just hilarious. I also thought I was going to come on in this cosplay as the Pringles guy with the mustache, but I decided against it. It'd be a little fun that way. But no, this is always a lot of fun. Like I said, I think we've been doing our own little mock draft solo for the past few weeks, and it's always fun to kind of just go through and talk about some of these names and bring up some good names. And if you pick Chad Muma again, Jurgen, I swear to God.
Maybe. But yes, as the title of the show is what we talked about, guys. You know why we're here. We did this last year. It was quite the undertaking last year. Hopefully better Wi-Fi connection this time around. But in all seriousness, we have our three-round – Justin gets to speak to it last week. We have our three-round 2023 NFL mock draft that we are doing here on the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast that we will get to here in a few moments. Of course, it's 3 rounds. It's 102 selections. As I kind of said a week ago, I think I even gave the teams last week. The teams have been divided to us by equal amount of selections. We all have 34 picks to make. We're all going to be taking the future of a number of franchises in our hands, and we'll see if we are any better general manager than the likes of Trent Baalke and, actually, that's not that high of a bar to clear now that I think about it.
It's really not.
So, we're in a pretty good spot to say the very least. But in all seriousness, we will get to the mock draft here in a few quick moments. But of course, I said it. I've said the tagline before. I'll say it again. Fun, football, and chaos. You're going to get all three of those wrapped up in one in this entire episode. Let's start with a little bit more fun here. As a dog makes an appearance, let's start with some fun here with some NFL fact or fiction via our guy, Justin. Justin, what do we got?
All right. So the first one, guys, there will be 3 or more day 1 draft day trades. Fact or fiction?
I thought you came back from 2 weeks from now and were telling us, the truth. You're like Biff Tannen with the almanac and Back to the Future too.
What is this, your first time playing? Come on.
It's leave. Make like a tree and leave. Fact, I think there's so much potential for an early move for a quarterback amongst those teams that are picking the latter stages of the top 10. And then once you get that kind of movement going, the dominoes fall. We saw it last year. The dominoes just fell as soon as the first trade was made. So I think there's a lot of teams that are going to start, getting trigger happy and want to jump up for a guy that they want. So I think this is an easy call for me. I think it's a fact. I can't tell you which teams because we don't really know, but I think it's a fact that you're going to see more than 3 trades on day 1.
Yeah, I'm with Rick here. I think part of it is still going to be the intrigue of if, 2 of the quarterbacks that have been so highly ranked to this point, if they even fall a little bit, what will that cause in terms of a windfall of teams trying to trying to get their guy. If there is one position that teams will definitively try to trade upwards, quarterback. So if we're assuming that two of the quarterbacks are going to fall out of maybe the top 3, 4, 5, then I think we could definitely see some trades there. And I think there is one or two players that could be traded up where that are non-quarterbacks that end up, there could be a little bit of a trade up as well. So if the 3 or more if the over under is set at like 2.5, I'd easily hit the over on that. And if it's 3, I'd hit the over there. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of activity.
Yeah, and the other thing too, not only the top tier guys, but even last year Justin's Jets came back into the first round for Jermaine Johnson because a guy will fall and stopping the slide. I mean, we've seen that happen. You go back to Brady Quinn when he was drafted, he was falling, and then the Browns traded back in, to get him. So it's guys that start sliding. If you get them for a better value, I know, Jurgen, this is a big thing for you. You always love the value. So if you get a guy who was projected as like a number 5 pick at 20, that saves you a considerable amount of money and works out for you in the end.
And also, people forget Lamar Jackson, who, funny enough, is still very much in the news cycle. He was a guy that the Ravens traded back into the first round to get. He was at I think it was the last pick of the first round, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he was.
So, and that wasn't the Ravens pick naturally. They had to trade back up into that. So
yeah,
we could see there's definitely some value, and there might be a couple guys here that could warrant the value. Last season was very heavy on trading up for receivers, trading up for guys, defensive player as well. I think the Eagles with the Jordan Davis pick, I want to say that may have been a trade up. So there was a lot of activity last year, to say the very least, and we could definitely see that this year, especially if a guy or two ends up slipping. As Rick said, if a guy is projected to go at 7 and is available at 25, someone's going to get him. Someone is going to get him. So that's how it goes. So I'm with Rick here. I think this is an easy fact over 3 day 1 draft day trades.
Yeah. All right. Keeping with the theme, more draft eligible talk. There will be less than 4 quarterbacks drafted in the first round this year.
So, less than means we're talking about 3, which means that one of these projects has to fall completely out of the first round. I'm going to say fiction, because I feel like there are teams that will take. There are more teams that need a quarterback here than meets the eye, and there are more teams that might be inclined to take a quarterback in the first round than meets the eye. And so I think if a guy slides, same thing. If a guy slides from 7 to 18, Tampa Bay is right there to take a quarterback at 19 as well. Detroit could take a quarterback at 18. Minnesota could even take one in the low 20s, or they could try and find a guy. So I think the names that we're thinking of in the top 2, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, are going to be there. I think the hype about Richardson and the hype about Levis there's a caveat to that, I think, though. Now that I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here, because we thought last year that Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis were going to go in the first round, and Kenny Pickett went late first round, and Malik Willis didn't even go to the third. And it seems like that's been the right call here. But I think that this year, the quarterback class is just too much of a plethora of talent to let any of those guys go to the second day. So I think it's a fiction.
Yeah.
But it's a big caveat because, again, we said that last year, and look what happened.
Exactly. And it's one of those things that maybe teams are – we kind of talked about it last week, and even like the draft talk that we've begun to have here on the show is just, if you don't love the guy, why use the first round pick on him if you think he'll be available later on? Or if at the end of the day he gets taken and you don't get him, if you weren't completely sold, why take the risk? And sometimes the risks pay off and sometimes they don't. That's why it's called high risk, high reward, right? So, but I'm kind of with Rick. I think Richardson, to me, would be the bigger shock because so many teams are so enamored with the other factors that he could bring. I feel that at the end of the day, it's gotten to a point that I'm not saying it because of his play. Obviously, he struggled in his one season starting and it didn't look the best. Like, the tape is obviously something that people talk about, but it just, with how enamored people have been, I think he'll probably still be a first. And Will Levis, again, to me, big detriment, the whole mayonnaise and coffee thing, not a fan of it. But even if I try to look past that, I think there's going to be a team.
Listen, it might work in some markets. You never know.
That's true. I think that's part of it. And also, just, you mentioned it, Rick. I think it's an underrated amount of teams that are going to look to draft a quarterback, even if the kid isn't going to start immediately. It's very, you're talking about the value thing, Rick. I think it's a valuable thing that behind your quarterback is a quarterback that's on a cheap deal. Yeah. And there's nothing cheaper I don't necessarily veteran deals, but there's nothing that is a better chance of being a combination of cheap contract and good player potentially than a rookie player, especially a guy that you think has the talent in the first couple rounds.
Absolutely.
Let me rephrase this then. How many quarterbacks are going in the first round?
That's a better question, I think. That's really a better question. See,
that's where I was really going with this.
That's a better question, I think.
I'm not saying this is my definitive answer, but I think it could be 5. I think it could become 5.
So I'm inclined to agree. However, there's a part of me that says we could see 6.
Ooh.
And I think the reasoning for that is that there's a quarterback that's, in the later tier who I don't think we're going to draft in our 3-round mock, who I've seen teams that are like, he's a project similar to Richardson, but DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson out of UCLA, has some intangibles too that, are interesting enough. And again, I think that would be an ultimate reach for a team that's in the back half of the first round. But again, look at the teams that are in the back half of the first round and look at their quarterback rooms that are there. The guys that are there that have established roles, who are their backups? The Eagles just got Marcus Mariota, the backup Jalen Hurts. Do you trust that? I don't know. The Bengals, Joe Burrow's there, but who's his backup? It's if you want to add another name to that quarterback room, maybe get another youth guy in there. And again, that might not be the best play because of how young Burrow is, but at the same time, you'd rather try and have a kid who might become a star who then you could maybe trade away for assets instead of a Brandon Allen or a Danny Etling, or a Mac Jones. Spoiler alert, Billy Zappi's your QB1 in New England as there. So 5 is, I think, a good target number, but I could see it being 6 if there's a run. There could be a run. I think you could see it that high.
That would certainly be, if it's 6, I would be shocked. I think the good baseline is 4. If I had to bet, I think 5 would be a strong possibility. 6 would definitely surprise me. I will say that. But again, we are talking about the position that if we're talking, teams are most willing to take the risk. It's always going to be the quarterback position that teams will risk it for.
Yeah.
As Bruce Arians would say, no risk it, no biscuit.
So, we all love biscuits.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially when they're good. All right. Oh, yeah. Justin, outstanding Factor Fiction. I believe that's the end of Factor Fiction, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But we do still have a little bit more fun to have before we get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, our Gameskeeper has more. He's got an NFL Would You Rather for us.
I mean, it's the question that's on everyone's mind. This is the time of year. It's the biggest time of year for the number one. I can tell Jurgen already knows what I'm going to say. All things even. Don't worry about the actual team. Don't worry about who's on there. Don't worry about the coaches. If you had the number 1 overall pick this year, CJ Stroud or Bryce Young? Way to beat me to it, Jurgen.
Knew where you were going.
Absolutely. It's the obvious question.
Of course.
That's why people are tuning in, Rick.
I know, but I don't know if this is going to handicap us if we're going to already guess what Jurgen's number 1 pick is going to be.
No, it's not, because remember, he said you have, because
all things being equal, right?
Here's the thing with mock drafts. There is a little bit of who you would take, but you also need to consider what the team is looking at. And like Justin said, that's why Justin is saying take away a lot of the stuff, because exactly
purely from a quarterback perspective, you're building a team. You have no one on your roster. You don't have a coach. Who are you taking?
For me,
Bryce Young. See, here's what I'll say too. Just before I'll let you carry on, Jurgen. But you said purely on a quarterback standpoint, and I'm glad you said that, because I would say neither. But Jurgen, continue with Bryce Young.
Rick is going Peter Skoronski with the first overall pick.
I'm not going Skoronski with the first overall pick. No.
No, but in all seriousness, I think if all things were even, I think if it was a different team that was even taking the first overall pick, like let's say if the Chicago Bears had actually traded Justin Fields away when they had gotten the first overall pick and they said, hey, we're going to hit the reset button at quarterback, I think they would have taken Bryce Young. Is that maybe in part because if they were already running a similar scheme, Bryce Young would basically be a glove fit? Yes, but even, again, take away the Bears' perspective of it. I think the potential of dynamic playmaking ability of Bryce Young is a little bit better than CJ Stroud's. I'm not saying CJ Stroud can't. I'm not even saying, I think it's been a little bit undersold how good CJ Stroud is with his legs. I think he's mobile. He's not a Bryce Young, Justin Fields level of mobile, I don't think. But he's still relatively he's not cement-footed in the pocket. He's just not.
No.
And if you don't think he's mobile, I'm sorry, you've been looking at the tape wrong. I think, between the two of them, there's so many things that are similar that it just starts to become a parse of hairs of what you take. And I think Bryce Young would get my edge because, yes, I know he's quote unquote a little bit shorter, but just that dynamic playmaking ability. And I think there's a factor to Bryce Young. There's just something with the way Bryce Young carries himself that I think translates well. So again, vacuum, not considering who the team picking first is, not considering the coaches, what their preferences are, all that. I think in a regular world, Bryce Young would be the definitive first overall pick in this draft at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different X factors. CJ Stroud is taller than Bryce Young is, and that accounts for something. But, you have to understand what the roles are going to be of these guys. And, Jurg, you're right. CJ Stroud's not exactly as fleet of foot as Bryce Young is. Bryce Young is that creatorial mode where he can kind of make something happen out of nothing. If you go all the way back to Johnny Manziel's Texas A&M days, the one play that everyone remembers from his Texas A&M run was that play against Alabama in the red zone where he was scrambling, lost the ball, popped it up, caught it, and found somebody in the end zone. That's a play that a creator makes. Bryce Young could make that play 9 times out of 10. Can't say the same for C.J. Stroud. And in this current NFL, you have to know that if C.J. Stroud is your quarterback, you need to surround him with a really good offensive line because he's going to be your pocket passer. He's not going to be a Joe Burrow who's going to run. He's more going to be a Justin Herbert. And Herbert can run a little bit, but Herbert's more your prototypical pocket passer, I think. But I think the number one pick in this draft, because of his talent and his overall keen ability and awareness, and also really the fact that he was tutored by Nick Saban, is Bryce Young. I mean, I think that goes without saying. I mean, Saban wasn't a good NFL coach, but he's a great football coach. He knows how to train guys and teach them to be popular. Look at me. I'm not just fan anymore. Heaping praise on Alabama in the first round. What world are we living in nowadays? The truth of the matter is that Bryce Young, I think, has more of the intangibles. The only thing that I question more is that he doesn't have the height, so he's going to have to make plays on the run. And how well does that translate? Because, again, keep in mind, when at Alabama, you're playing lower tier SEC schools, and you have that one off week where you're playing McNeese or Southeastern Louisiana, where you're going to have a cupcake game. Not a lot of cupcakes in the NFL, I would say. And these are guys who are playing at a higher speed than any of those guys in the SEC probably do. So, I mean, it's a question mark of will Bryce Young change his mindset and change the way that he runs frequently, based upon that. I mean, he might have a rough first year, but I think overall, career-wise, he's the better athlete, I think, than Stroud is.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you here. And for us picking him, it's not to say that C.J. Stroud can't be great.
No.
Just for the viewing people. Like, C.J. Stroud could very well end up being the best quarterback of this draft class, purely speaking. Like, it's very much a possibility. But I think you hit the nail on the head there, Rick, where the idea of that dynamic playmaking ability, that next level, that turn, chicken salad, turn chicken into chicken salad, got to censor for the kids. I think that ultimately is what gives Bryce Young the edge here. But again, that's taking away everything. And if there's one thing I think all three of us lifelong NFL fans have realized, NFL teams, sports teams in general, love going with what they're familiar with. And I think that's one of the reasons. As a good friend of mine who's great with this NFL mock draft stuff, Justin's met him a couple times. I actually would want to see if I could get him here on the show one of these days. But as a good friend of mine, Stu said, Stu Brooking, if Bryce Young was 6'2", 6'3", it wouldn't even be a debate of who's going number one in this draft. It wouldn't even be close. And I think that's a testament to just the utter talent that Bryce Young has. Whoever gets him, if they screw him up, I would hold it against that franchise forever. Because if you screw up this kind of talent, we got to have some serious conversations about, as I've said for Aaron Rodgers' case in Green Bay, managerial malpractice. You can't screw this up with a talent like that. You just can't.
Yep. No, it's absolutely agreeable there. And it's the truth. Like, you can't change how tall a guy is, Like, you can't teach height. You can't teach speed. He's got the speed. He doesn't have the height, but the speed is what matters more, especially when he can make plays like the way that he does.
Yeah. And you can't teach talent at the end of the day. Like,
exactly.
Like, both these guys are talented, but you just can't teach talent.
Right.
So there's that. Justin, that was a good one. Do we got another ticker? Do we got another one?
Do you want one?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's up to you.
We're on a roll. Let's do it.
Okay.
Gonna have a 5-hour show. It's fine.
Same question. Quentin Johnston and Jackson Smith and Jigba.
So this is tough. And the reason why it's tough is because JSN didn't play a whole lot last year. But all you really need to see is that Rose Bowl tape to know how talented a wide receiver this guy is. But will that translate over now that he's kind of fallen off a bit here and there? Quentin Johnston, on the other hand, was this surprise story of this season because TCU was a surprise story of this year. I think for me, I go the reverse of what I was saying based upon height. I think you're talking Quentin Johnston. I think that there's one play in particular that I look at, and that was in that TCU-Michigan game where Michigan sends that blitz. Duggan throws underneath. Johnston catches it way behind the line of scrimmage. It's like 3rd and 7. He's behind the line of scrimmage. And all of a sudden, he runs east to west, finds a lane, and just steps, and he's gone. Like that type of route running and speed and control and second gear shift is unheard of for me as a wide receiver. I love the way he plays. I think that he's a very talented. He'll be off look and he'll be overlooked because he's from a TCU. So everyone will say, well, is it really worth the hype? Is it really the guy that we think, or was it just a lucky season? But I think that he's going to be a much better receiver in the NFL than he ever was in college. And I would take him. I mean, I think their career trajectories are relatively similar, but I would take him because, like I said, we haven't had a full year of JSN in 2 years. That weighs something for me. You know, it's a similar argument for Jameson Williams. We had a full year, but we didn't have him in the championship game last year. So there was a lot of talk about should he go that high. And he didn't play a lot this year because Detroit had a lot of good weapons. So
he was also injured to
start, right? So that weighs on you. You know, do you factor in injury concerns in that way? I do. So I go with Quentin Johnston over Jackson Smith-Njigba.
In this particular draft, the reason why I would lean toward Quentin Johnston, it doesn't even have to do with the injury for JSN, because unlike a lot of other guys that only have 1 year of production going into their draft year, which is normally like sometimes a red flag for me, like a case by case scenario, of course. I think the thing with Johnston is that he is such a different archetype compared to a lot of these receivers. I think a lot of these receivers are like 6'1" sub height, like they're 6'1" or less, and they're under a certain weight threshold. Now, I'm not saying that disqualifies these guys from being good. I think there's a lot of good, slot middle route running receivers in this draft class. I think there's still a lot of talent to be had in this class on the receiver. It's just not at the same level of the last couple of years where we've had, we saw a graphic. I think it's probably going to be a conversation point we're going to have in a future episode, going into the spring and summer, of the last couple of draft classes with some of these receivers have been, you talk about a Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown. We don't necessarily have a lot of guys in this class that are that kind of physical freak of nature. Quentin Johnston is that. Like Rick said, I think Quentin Johnston just blew onto the scene. For people are talking about how it's a little bit of a red flag that he didn't catch a supreme amount of touchdowns from Max Duggan this season. Look, I'm gonna be real with you. Max Duggan ain't having that season if he doesn't have the option to throw it to Quentin Johnston. It's just simple as that. We would not even consider him even for a 5th round pick if it wasn't for the fact that Quentin Johnston had the season and was that dynamite in that offense. So I would lean towards Quentin Johnston because, again, I think, this goes by team need, but he is different from the other receivers in this class. Now, do I think JSN probably has a higher ceiling than a lot of the guys you could compare to him? Absolutely. I'm not saying he doesn't. I think with these two, I don't find fault in if you pick JSN over Johnston. I don't. But to me, this is more of the pick where I need to review my wide receiver room and see this. And is JSN, the question you need to ask, is JSN's ceiling higher definitively than the receivers on my team that are supremely similar skill sets to him? Yeah. And that's when you need to ask that question.
And the thing, too, with TCU, just to kind of put this out there, Johnson didn't have the touchdowns. Kendre Miller almost had 20 touchdowns on the ground himself. Yeah. So a lot of the offense also ran through Duggan's legs and Miller's legs. Johnson was like that secret weapon that they had. Yeah. Whereas at Ohio State, if he wasn't hurt, you could argue JSN would have been the number one, and he would have been the guy. And he probably would have broken a lot of college receiving records, but because that's really Ohio State, while they had a good running game, they were really going as Stroud went, and their defense too.
Exactly. So I'm with you there. All right. Do we have any trivia this week, Justin? Or...
Nope.
Fair enough. No, just always want to do our due diligence. We don't want to rob the people of the games that our game master creates for us. But guys, we all know why we're here. I think it's finally time.
Oh yeah,
as the knuckles are cracked.
Oh yeah.
This has been highly anticipated. Even I think we can even argue from last year in terms of just the fun we had with the mock. But it is our 2023 Sports Agents of Chaos 3-round mock. It's here. It's time. And as it says in the bottom right, the draft begins.
Beautiful.
So I do have the list of what teams belong to who. Once again, and we'll just obviously state that as it goes. But the person with the first overall pick here with the Carolina Panthers on the clock is myself. So I think it's obvious here. The Panthers, we all know they're going to quarterback. We all know that is the need. That's why they traded up to the first overall pick. And we know who, as PFF, obviously they have their little list here, and we can sort by positions, but we know it's going to be between old buddy here and our good friend over here. And we said the praises of both guys, especially Bryce Young. Bryce Young definitely has the talent, and it's smoke season, so we don't know who's going to where. But Frank Reich is the coach. I think there's pressure in the organization from Dave Tepper to obviously hit this pick. I mean, I think it could be a hit no matter which quarterback they go. But I think Frank Reich has his archetype of who he's worked with consistently in his career, of who he's found success with. And I think the idea, again, Bryce Young, amazing. But I think the Carolina Panthers specifically have a mold they want to run with. And I think that'll be with CJ Stroud. So a combination of, can he go first overall? Yes. I'm not saying that, CJ Stroud couldn't go first overall compared to Bryce Young, but I think with the first overall pick, the Carolina Panthers will end up taking CJ Stroud.
Woo! I mean, let's discuss this a little bit too, because last year in our mock draft, we had Aiden Hutchinson going number 1, and Travon Walker I don't think was even in like the conversation for pick 1 or pick 2. Actually, I don't think he was in the top 4 because I know that Thibodeau went 2, and then I had Neal and Gardner. So Walker was the number 1 pick, wasn't even our number 1. So Stroud, I think, is a very solid quarterback selection here. I really do. And you're absolutely right, Jurgen. With Carolina, you look at their offense, you look at who they've got. They just added Miles Sanders as their running back, who will probably be their top guy. They have DJ Chark. They have Adam Thielen, a really good tight end room in Hayden Hurst. And true, the weapons that are there are helpful. The only thing that I think really throws a loop for this for Carolina is the fact that you drafted Matt Corral last year. So that means that behind Andy Dalton, who will probably be the presumptive number 1, you're going to have 2 rookies in Corral who didn't get a full season last year because he was hurt, and the presumptive number 1 pick, either Stroud or Young. So Carolina might be sitting there, thinking, okay, we're picked the quarterback again. But one of these 2 guys, both of them are generational talents. So I think couldn't go wrong either way, but I agree with you. Panthers, their mold is more of a Stroud mold.
Yeah. And again, it's nothing against Bryce, but it's just and look, at the end of the day, maybe they'll shock us and maybe they'll go with Bryce Young. But I just think they still need to build out that offense, but with the roster set up, with what they're trying to do, I think they're really trying to build that offensive line to be strong. Like I think even dating back to last season, I think the idea was to build that offensive line for a quarter. Because even look at the last couple of years, I know different coach, but the Panthers haven't necessarily had a quarterback that is known for moving with their legs either the last couple seasons. Like I think they want the guy with the high ceiling that could play a certain way, and I just think that CJ Stroud is the guy that they want to end up going with here. Again, I think 50-50. I already said my take earlier. I think it could end up being Bryce Young. I think in a perfect world it might be, but I think sometimes in drafts, it's not always the best player gets taken first overall. Sometimes, yes, when there's a generational player, but
last year.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes the best player doesn't always go with the first overall pick. So I have CJ Stroud going to the Panthers. I believe the first ever Ohio State quarterback to be taken number 1 overall as well.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. But even going to last week, and yes, I watched last week's show, when Justin labels the number 1 overall pick as a potential bust or a miss in the first round, that tells you something. Yeah. Should have gone with somebody else.
Very true. Very true. All right, Justin, any takes on this, or do we keep it going?
That's where I think they're going to go. I mean, look, is he better than Bryce Young? I don't know if that's the case. He might be, but he's got the like you guys said, the prototypical archetype of a quarterback that I think Frank Reich loves. Frank Reich is enamored with and will inevitably be the number 1 overall pick, whether we think it's the right decision or not. I happen to think so. I know you like Bryce Young better, but it'll depend on where they go. Really, 'cause that's one of the more important parts of the draft. I mean, of course, getting the guy is right, but having the system to develop this guy and make sure he has the tools to succeed is just as important, if not more.
Absolutely. And I always love it when the guys give me perfect segues. This is the perfect segue to the number 2 overall pick on the board. Rick is picking for the Houston Texans. Rick, who are we going with this pick?
So this is where, things are interesting, I think, because definitely there's a conversation about quarterbacks. And I think the Texans, they did have Case Keenum going in there in that room. Davis Mills is obviously still there. However, I wrote something down here, and I'm going to read this out to you. If Young, then Stroud. If Stroud, then Anderson.
Wow.
Will Anderson goes number 2 in my mind to the Houston Texans. Look, Will Anderson is the number 1 prospect in this draft class. He is a bruiser. He is a phenomenal every down edge. He is the J.J. Watt that the Texans need on the defensive side. They also have 2 first-round picks to play with, and I'm thinking that their quarterbacks are going to fall here. I think you cannot pass up on a talent like Will Anderson in this way. I mean, look at everything that he did last year. 14 sacks. Over the last 2 years, 29 total sacks this guy had. He played nearly every down of defense in his junior year in 2021. I'm telling you something. This guy is a cannot-miss talent. And I get the hype with the quarterbacks, and I understand all of that. But in my mind, you do not pass up on a guy. He may be a bit undersized at 6'3", but you can always convert him back to a linebacker. You do not pass up on a guy who has the talent and the game that Will Anderson does. So I think he goes number 2. If I'm the Texans, I would take him. I wouldn't let him pass me by. The other thing too that I want to say before you go ahead, if I take a quarterback here, I don't think there's a good defensive edge guy that can go at 12. I'm flipping the mold, thinking that a quarterback will fall to 12, and that's when I'll take a quarterback.
Which very much is a possibility. I was going to say, even if you put him at a linebacker, you need to make sure, like you hired a defensive head coach, you need to make sure that he gets to the quarterback a lot, because you're talking about Will Anderson. Like for people like not remembering, this is a guy who in his college career he's won the Lombardi, he's won the Nagurski, he's the 2-time SEC Defensive Player of the Year, first team all. Like this is far and away the best defensive player. Even if Jalen Carter wasn't a dummy off the field, this is still the best defensive player in this draft class. This is a guy that before last season, before Bryce, maybe aside from Bryce Young, before CJ Stroud popped up, Will Anderson at number 2 was pretty realistic, as a choice. So I'm not necessarily surprised that off of a talent perspective. It just all depends on what Houston says. Look, once again, I've been beating the drum for a while. The Texans shouldn't go quarterback with the 2nd overall pick. So I'm not necessarily disagreeing with this. I know Justin is flabbergasted. This is the 2nd mock draft Justin's been a part of this week without someone is taking Will Anderson at 2 to the Texans and not a quarterback.
So here's the funny thing too. I'm one of those guys that likes to go back and listen to our old episode just to kind of hear the points we make and how stupid I sound at times. In the episode titled "They the Ones," when you and I did a Harry Potter trivia back and forth, one of the things we talked about was DeMeco Ryans being the head coach of the Texans. And I do remember saying this, and I quote, "If the Texans don't take a quarterback at 2, what in God's name are they doing?" Well, they're not taking a quarterback at 2 because Will Anderson's right there, and it makes the most sense for them. It's very flabbergasting, and this is one of those things. It's a quarterback or it's the edge. Keep in mind, too, last year, what did the Texans do at 3? Derek Stingley. And that stunned a lot of people. So maybe it's what that stuns them, but I think this is a really good move for them. It fills a need that they have on the D-line, but they can also get them back to a 3-4 linebacker spot. And with DeMeco Ryans there, you know that Will Anderson's going to have the tutelage necessary to be a force in the AFC South.
He will turn him into a double-digit sack machine.
100%.
At minimum year 2. Like, 100%. Will Anderson is talented. Justin, you do have, for the people, you have the 3rd and 4th overall picks here back-to-back. So before you get into your selections, do you want to expand upon the fact that, once again, you see the Texans not go after Bryce Young?
Look, I get it, but I don't understand, especially with the way that everyone has said Bryce Young is this generational talent. I get the arguments that, hey, you're not gonna have him sit on his back for a whole year, or either you can literally sit on the bench for a whole year because you don't have the tools to provide for him. Because like we said with the first overall pick, if you have to when you draft someone, it is your responsibility to provide them the tools to succeed. And the Texans might not have that at this point. You're right, but I don't understand. If you think that Bryce Young is a generational talent, there's no guarantee, even if you have the number 1 overall pick next year, that you're going to feel the same way or that you're going to have that chance to draft a quarterback. And the fact is, in this league, if you want to win a Super Bowl, you need the quarterback. That is the one piece that is non-negotiable. You can do it with great edge rushers also. You could do it with great receivers on top of that. You could do it with a fantastic running game or a great offensive line. But every single one of these teams has good quarterback play, no matter what way you shake it. And the Texans do not. The Texans don't even have starting quarterback play. They don't. As much as I've enjoyed watching them, who's their quarterback now? Who's the kid that was there? That's been like up and down, but not.
Well, they have Davis Mills, but they also got Case Keenum in the offseason.
Davis Mills is who I'm thinking. Yeah, Case Keenum. Case Keenum. How old is he? 38?
34.
Still, that's old.
The prodigal son. The prodigal son. He went to Houston, Justin. The prodigal son.
The point is, as good as Will Anderson Jr. might be, if the Texans aren't taking Young, they should trade this pick. Flat out. It is not worth taking Will Anderson at 2 when you can get so much more, especially if you're going to fall down to 4 and you can end up with a Jalen Carter. Because I guarantee you.
I'm not a big fan of Jalen Carter, though, but I understand your point.
I understand, but the point is you'll still have that defensive line talent. He may not be exactly the same, but I think I'd rather have maybe the Colts' first-round pick this year and next year to think that they might get Bryce Young at 2, because I guarantee you there is a team in the top 10 that will overpay mightily in that situation. And if you are not taking that quarterback, it is asset mismanagement to not trade that pick.
Well, to your point, Justin, before you make your pick here with the Cardinals. Right. But before you make your pick here with the Cardinals, if let's say the Texans do this in real life, how quickly do you think the phones will blare in Arizona's war room that they want the 3rd overall pick to get Bryce?
Oh my God. It's funny. We were joking so hard. The Cardinals have had a terrible offseason. They have not had a good offseason. This is the best thing that could happen to the Cardinals, short of Will Anderson and Jalen Carter going 1 and 2.
Yeah.
All right. There is no better situation that the Cardinals can have for that to happen. For Bryce Young, the projected number 1 overall pick in a lot of high name boards,
to somehow fall to 3.
To somehow fall to 3 in a pick that the Cardinals, they don't even really want. Every rumor out there is CJ Stroud or Bryce Young at 1, CJ Stroud or Bryce Young at 2. Maybe they go somewhere else. The Cardinals want to trade every single one. So for them to come out smelling like a rose with one of the top 2 guys sitting there is literally the best situation. And I would be, I can't even imagine the trades that would be offered for them for that pick. It is
even just the Colts, like you said, like the Indy will pay the piper if
mightily.
Even if Stroud falls to 3, they're gonna pay to get him as the quarterback of the future. Because you're talking about Frank Reich wanting a CJ Stroud type player. Like, I'm sure Indy wouldn't mind CJ Stroud either.
Oh, Shane Steichen would love him in Indianapolis. Absolutely.
So that being said, and we are unfortunately / fortunately, we're not doing mock trades because we're not trying to do that whole value system here.
We also can't because we're not subscribed to PFF, but that's another conversation for another day.
Yeah, that too. Justin, who are you taking here with your Cardinals and Colts picks?
That is a good question. So because there are no trades, the Colts are really going to make out of this. So obviously, I think that the next best player on the board, character concerns aside, is going to be Jalen Carter. I think he's fits a need. He's arguably the best player. I mean, before all these character issues, he was considered to be possibly the number 1 non-quarterback prospect on the board. And I think he will be the best fit in Arizona. What do you guys think?
Listen, Jalen Carter was the number one overall prospect for a while. And then obviously, what happened with Georgia, as tragic as it was, and it hurt his draft stock. Do I think he's still a very talented NFL player? Absolutely. What are his concerns? Motivation and weight control. Because he came into that pro day and he looked like he was just out of shape completely. And that might have been because he wasn't in the weight room because he had to handle all of his personal affairs and all of that. If I'm Arizona, and it's a good situation because I think they have Jonathan Gannon, who was the Eagles defensive coordinator. I think Jonathan Gannon, if he gets Jalen Carter 3, is going to run this guy through the ringer in offseason training camp, make sure that he is ready. This is a guy who could be the next Simeon Rice for that Arizona Cardinals defensive line. And it's scary because, yeah, if he's there, you take him, absolutely. He's a very good defensive player. He fits a lot of schemes. He's a run stuffer. He can get to the quarterback. I think he's a very good player. You just got to manage your expectations and make sure that he is fully committed 100% to playing at the number 3 overall pick.
Yeah. I'm kind of with Rick. Like, it's funny here because honestly, if you had not taken him somehow, Justin, I would have gone with him at number 5 to Seattle because I think this would be prime territory. Assuming the draft should fall the way it should, like I could see Jalen Carter going to one of the 2 teams there in the NFC West with the Cardinals or the Seahawks. Because I think if you're talking about a guy who's willing to take a risk on a guy like that, Pete Carroll screams to me like he'd love to have a Jalen Carter there, and I think they believe they would have the organizational structure to help figure things out. I don't believe the pick at all. Like best player available. That's what you went there. Like yes, I know Bryce Young's on the board, but they have their quarterback. No matter what your thoughts are on Kyler Murray at the end of the day, they have their quarterback, and you went best player available. Like sometimes that's just what you got to do. And I'm assuming. I didn't make the pick yet because I'm assuming, I want to let you make it officially, but I think I know who you're going for number 4 here.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily know if this is the way the board shakes out. I don't necessarily know if the Colts make this pick here. I think that they do their best to trade up, if not with Houston, then with Arizona, because someone is going to jump in front of them, assuming the board shakes out this way. But you're right. I'm going to go with Bryce Young. I was initially projecting myself to take Will Levis here. I do like Will Levis's intangibles. He's big. I don't care that people think he's so big and strong, and he's not necessarily going to be a good or mobile enough quarterback in the league. I think that this is where they would have gone. But I'm not going to pass up on Bryce Young. I mean, this guy's got immense talent. What does he have? Like 60 touchdowns thrown in the last 2 years in Alabama, and less than 15. Yeah,
it's actually close to 80.
Yeah, he good.
Go. He good.
So
he good.
He's going to be. This is almost like their Super Bowl this year. They made out. They're going to pair Bryce Young with Jonathan Taylor, and things are looking very good right now in Indy, at least offensively.
If the Colts can escape with a franchise quarterback, that'll be big. I would have kind of been like, if you had picked Will Levis here, dude, because honestly, I'm sorry, I'm getting Zach Wilson vibes from this kid. I think he's
he's like twice the size.
But see, it doesn't even have to do with that. I think there's faultiness to his game. I'm not the biggest fan.
Well, the problem with Will Levis is that he played at Kentucky. Kentucky's not a power, so Will Levis's weapons weren't the same as Bryce Young's and C.J. Stroud's. That's why he had the mistakes that he had made, because Kentucky, as good as Mark Stoops has made that team in the past couple of years, they're still not on the level of a top 10 program. So, Will Levis, I think, has the talent, but I understand your point. You're talking about either a Josh Allen mold, where he comes out of a school where nobody expects him to come out of, but he performs amazingly, or Zach Wilson, where he comes out of a school that people know, but he does terribly. I get the reservations on it a little bit. I do.
Yeah. That's just me. All right, moving on. 5th overall pick, the Seattle Seahawks, whose selection belongs to yours truly. Obviously, we see the needs here, and all of us separately have written down our needs. It says guard, center, defensive line. I don't think there's a definitive first-round center in this class. If there is, then I'll be mistaken later. I don't think there's a definitive first-round center. There's no Tyler Linderbaum in this draft class. I can confidently say that. So I think it goes to either guard or defensive line. I do like the idea, and I got this idea from Justin earlier in the week. I like the perception of potentially getting a Peter Skoronski here, and you just put him at the guard spot, and him and Charles Cross would dominate. But I think Seattle, the thing that made them as good as they were at their peak was the defense, and I think they need a little bit more pass rush. I don't think there's enough there to be scary. I do like the Draymond Jones free agency signing, but ultimately at the end of the day, I think they still need more. I think there's a kid who has the intangibles, has the talent, has everything they would want on paper, and I think Pete Carroll can mold him. So I'm going to go with the 5th overall pick with Seattle Seahawks. I'm taking Tyree Wilson with that selection.
I love the way Tyree Wilson plays. I really do. And this is a guy that I saw flying up draft boards and watched a few tapes. This kid has a great motor. He's 6'6", 275. He plays mean. His handwork and footwork, you got to make sure it's consistent, but Seattle will do that. And if that's the case, watch out. This guy's going to be really, really good.
Absolutely. Justin, you have the Lions here, so I don't know if I maybe took your selection there by chance. Although, I have a guess of where you're going to go, but I'm going to let you obviously say the pick itself. So who are you going with here at number 6 with Detroit?
You know, there's a lot of different directions that I could go with this pick. And some of them would be actually fairly surprising, I think, to a lot of people. I love what the Lions have done over the last couple of years, and I love where they're at now. I think that they have a multitude of possibilities, and they can really take a major step forward and maybe break into the playoffs, which they haven't done in a very, very long time. That being said, I think they need to build on some of the things that they were building on previously. I know they need a lot of help, and I know that there's going to be positions that they could probably address with one of these picks, but I'm going to say that Jared Goff is not an answer there long term. They have him out after this year, and as well as he's played for them, it's been inconsistent. And I think that's the reason that you could kind of say, hey, there's those 1 or 2 games that kept you out of the playoffs. Jared Goff didn't show up. And with that being said, I think they'll take their time. They'll draft one of these project quarterbacks. And I think the one that really fits the mold of what they're doing there is Will Levis. So at 6, I'm going to have them take Will Levis out of Kentucky. He's a big kid. He's got the arm. He'll play in a dome there, which will be good for him. And I really think it's someone that doesn't necessarily have to start that year and can really develop in a system that has been pretty good, developing some young players as of late.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been beating the drum for Jared Goff for a while because I think he's a lot better of a quarterback than most people think that he is. But this is a pick for the future because I don't think Jared Goff's going to be there for much longer. And if you're the Lions and you're getting close to a win now, especially if the Aaron Rodgers trade happens, how wide open that NFC North is going to be because Minnesota's a fraud. We know this for a fact going in. So the Lions, it's right there for the taking for them, and I would invest in the future, even future, because let's say Minnesota's okay still. Once Kirk Cousins goes, then you're talking about whoever their quarterback's going to be, Justin Fields if he's still in Chicago, whoever Green Bay's quarterback's going to be, and then if you have Will Levis, who's a seasoned, who understands how to play with the weapons they have, I think it's great. I really do. I think it's a very, very good selection by them.
Yeah, it's funny. We go back-to-back teams there, the Seahawks and the Lions, that very much quarterback of the future is in the conversation because the Seahawks are a team, despite the fact that the future Ring of Honor star Geno Smith is there and that he did get a contract extension. I think quarterback is certainly something they could consider at some point in this draft with one of their first 3 selections. I didn't go with it because I just felt the talent of Tyree Wilson was nice. I do definitely get why Justin is going with that. And again, if you think that someone else could steal your guy, go with your guy. I definitely get that mindset at all. So I'm not faulting the overall selection there. And I've gone 50-50 on Jared Goff. I've defended Jared Goff when he's been mentioned the same like of Ryan Tannehill because I will not allow that. But I'm also not I have banged the drum of I would be looking to find my Jared Goff successor as quick as I can as well. Again, value perspective. So I don't blame the selection right there. All right, Las Vegas Raiders. I have that pick. Don't worry, people. Rick's about to get a little run here. But I have the pick with the Las Vegas Raiders here. I didn't necessarily expect. I was 50-50 on if this guy was going to end up falling to this point in the draft board. Obviously, we see the needs here again. They need a lot. I don't think that could necessarily be overstated. I'm actually, I got to admit, I'm kind of torn between a couple of guys here, two in particular. I think you can make the argument of the offensive line, and they definitely need the offensive line. But God, that defense was terrible for Vegas last season. It wasn't good. So that's part of the reason why I'm also considering a defensive aspect of things here if you're Vegas. But it's Josh McDaniels. And if you're Josh McDaniels, do you think, hey, screw the offense, screw the defense, let me just go with the offense? But remember, when he started his tenure in New England, he actually started as a defensive guy before he moved to the offensive side of the ball. So Josh McDaniels has a little bit of an appreciation for both sides of things here. I think because of all that they've lost, I think they need to go with a kid who has a level head on him that isn't going to be an idiot with this selection. So let's do that. This is a little bit need, but I also think he's talented. I know he's not the number one guy here, but on most draft boards, he's the number one corner. I'm going to go with Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon here for the selection for the Raiders. I think that defense, the Lions, the Seahawks, and the Raiders had notoriously bad defenses last year. And it's ironic because those three teams just all went in a row. But I think they need to go with defense here. I think the offensive line depth of this draft class is really nice. I think a lot of teams that are in the first half of the second round, maybe even the second round as a whole, are going to get some good offensive linemen. So I think there's still that opportunity for the Raiders then. I just ultimately think they need to invest a little bit in that defense. They've hit the not restart button. They've hit a little bit of an organizational reset. They have not Jared Goff. They have Jimmy Garoppolo there now. And what does Jimmy G teams have? What aspect of Jimmy G teams have success? It's a good defense. So give me Gonzalez there.
Yeah, he's not the number one corner, but you're right. He's a guy that I think can really fit that mindset and become a leader in that secondary for them. I think that's an excellent pick for them. I think that's a safe selection at 7 for the Raiders. I do. As you mentioned, I think I'm next. I think I have 3 of these in a row, right? Atlanta, Chicago, and Philadelphia.
Yep, and then Justin tragically has the Titans.
So this is an interesting one for the Atlanta Falcons here. The reason why it's interesting to me is that there's a quarterback sitting there who they could, in theory, take. But if you're the Atlanta Falcons, why wouldn't you have gone after Lamar Jackson in the offseason? Arthur Blank basically said, no, we're good with Ritter and we're good with Taylor Heineke. Very smart man, of course, I say so. So that leads me to a very interesting conundrum here. The conundrum here is, do I go with trying to add another weapon to that room? You've got Kyle Pitts there. You had Drake London there last year, who was a rookie, who kind of needed to hold on the ball a little bit more. On your running back room, you have Tyler Allgeier, who was a big hit by us, and Cordero Patterson. So the question then becomes, aside from their needs, which they say their needs are defensive line, quarterback, and wide receiver, aside from their needs, if you're going to protect your quarterback here, and this is a backbreaker for the Bears, I think, you got to shape up that offensive line here. And I think this is where Peter Skoronski of Northwestern will go to the Falcons at number 8. He's a guy that can either do a combo guard or he can become a tackle. He's a guy that can kind of either way really be the guy that answers a lot of their questions here. I think the Bears would love to try and snatch him up because they have a young offensive line too, and he's a guy that can kind of fit either way. But I think the Falcons, if you want to really invest in the fact you've got Desmond Ritter there, I think you need to kind of shape that lineup a little bit more. And I think Skoronski is going to be the answer for them at number 8. So that's where I'm going for the Falcons. It's not a need per se, but they need to keep Desmond Ritter or Taylor Heineke standing in the pocket.
Make your strength even stronger. I don't blame it. They re-signed a couple guys this offseason in Lindstrom, who was becoming an all-pro caliber guard, and McGarry, who is going to be the right tackle. They have their left tackle spot at Matthew said, but Skoronski at left guard, you're basically saying 4 out of 5 spots on the offensive line are really good right now.
Yeah.
I don't blame it. I really don't. I would have argued maybe they need a definitive cornerback number 2, so I would have maybe looked at Witherspoon there. But I don't blame the selection at all. Skoronski's really good.
Yeah, and I mean, he was a guy that I think also, the Jets might have wanted to see him fall to them at 13 because they do need somebody like that, and he can be a guy. But there are this is a very tackle-heavy draft, so, you'd rather take a tackle who is going to be a tackle than Skoronski, who could be a little undersized at tackle and be a better guard. in that sense. Number 9 is Cole Kmet and the Chicago Bears, the Bears. So my new team, this is a very interesting one. I think there's going to be an interesting run to look at these wide receivers that are there, like Johnston or JSN, because their wide receiver room is not the greatest. And again, I think that, as good as Chase Claypool is, indeed, they have DJ Moore, who they got in the Panthers trade. You might want to add another younger guy so you can not rely on Equanimeous St. Brown as much. And it might be a bad idea here, but I think that for me, their secondary, was young last year, but they got Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker. But why not add somebody else to that room? And Devin Witherspoon is phenomenal. I mean, he's an excellent set cornerback. He's a little on the short side, of course, but at the same time, he's a guy that, knows how to play the game. You just got to monitor him when he's infractions-wise, because he's a guy that could get called for a lot of hands to the face penalties or pass interferences, but that comes with time. So if you pair him with Kyler Gordon on the opposite side and Jaquan Brisker, who had over 100 tackles, that Chicago secondary is looking pretty tough. And the thing, too, is that the Bears don't have to reach because they've got 2 other picks in the second round. If they really want a wide receiver, this class is pretty deep. So I'd say they could probably go for a wide receiver later on there. So I send Devin Witherspoon to the Bears. And now this is where it gets interesting. The Eagles at 10. This is where it gets really, really interesting here because you've got 2 outstanding weapons in Johnston and JSN there for the Eagles there that are ripe for the taking. And so the question really becomes, which one would they want to add to that room? But the thing about it is, do they really need another wide receiver? A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith were excellent. And if you keep Quez Watkins there, you've got a solid 3. What I think they might need more and where I think they should go, at least for me, for my money, I want to see them take an unproven commodity and see if they can make him into something. And there's a guy that's been shooting up the draft boards like crazy here. And I don't really know why. I mean, he's undersized. He's 6'1", but he's an interior nightmare in the mold of a Fletcher Cox, who maybe this is a passing of the torch pick. Kalijah Kancey at number 10 from Pitt to the Philadelphia Eagles. It's a guy who I've seen a lot of tape on and who, you know what? It's interesting to kind of watch it because you really think, how is he going up this high? But he's got a great twitch. The hands and the feet are lightning quick. This is the guy who knows how to play a 3-toe technique. And if you're the Eagles and you want to keep stuffing the run when you've got Tony Pollard, who really starred for the Cowboys late last year, when Saquon Barkley is still in your room, when Brian Robinson last year for the Commanders could have been a star and really was towards the second half of the year. You put another run stuffer in the middle right there to the Kalijah Kancey, and this is a guy who could really shape that Eagles defense. So is it high for him? Sure. And are there guys that are up there that you might want to take as well? Maybe. But at the same time, I look at that room and I say, you know what? We've also got the 30th pick. There are other receivers we can take at 30 that might be a little safer. Get this guy now. This is the exact same one I have with the Texans. Get the best guy you can now for fit of need. And then if the chips fall where they may, you get the guy that you're expecting to get at the later pick. So I take Kancey at 10 for the Eagles.
I don't blame you. I think both Justin and me have really liked Kalijah Kancey here late in the draft process. ACC Defensive Player of the Year, strong force on that defensive line for Pittsburgh, especially this season. Talented kid, to say the very least. I think he's shooting up draft boards for a good reason. I think he's superly talented. All 3 picks overall, I think were solid hits there, relatively speaking. I will say for the Bears, Witherspoon is a good pick, but if Skoronski somehow would have fallen to them, that would have been just the perfect selection. But
so in my head, what I had thought was going to happen was that Quentin Johnson would be there at 8, and that's a home run hit for the Falcons. But with all the talk of him not even going to the draft because the NFL thinks he's going to go in the 20s,
which I think is stupid.
But there might be something there we don't know. Like in the, I hate to use the movie Draft Day, but it's the movie Draft Day. What do you not know about that quarterback that makes him fall from 1 to 7? You know. Right. So what do you know? What do you not know about Quentin Johnson makes him fall from 6 to maybe 11 if Justin wants him for the Titans, which I don't think is a bad person to have there. At it's really an embarrassment of riches at this point for the Titans. Johnston or JSN, who do you want? Because you need a wide receiver. Because Traylon Burks was not your answer.
An embarrassment of riches for a team that's an embarrassment. Justin,
Yes.
Titans at 11.
Oh man, one day we will find out why you hate the Titans. So it's a mystery that has plagued me for a long time. And
We'll have a tell-all podcast one of these days in the spring and summer.
But you guys nailed it. I'm actually really excited that this happened because I was looking to talk about Winston Johnson a little bit while you guys were talking about him in the Would You Rather. This is a kid that, again, a lot of people are saying that their touchdown numbers were down and that scares them. But you have to understand the system he was playing in and the production he had, because he did have a ton of yardage. He's 6'3", but he doesn't really play 6'3" yet. He's a kind of a guy that's got to learn to use his size a little bit. But you saw the production he had against the cream of the crop in the NCAA playoffs last year and the college football playoffs. And he was legitimately one of, if not the best playmaker on the field at the time. This is a kid that all they have to do is put the ball in his hands and he can make things happen. And that's something that the Titans absolutely need at this point since they've traded A.J. Brown. I do like, what's his name that they drafted last year? Treylon Burks. I think that there were some injury concerns, and obviously they had some issues with other guys there. But Robert Woods is no longer there, and your window is seriously closing fast. And if they're not going to start trading assets and rebuild, then they're going to need to capitalize on what they still have there, and that is arguably one of the best running backs we've ever seen, certainly in the modern day, and in Derrick Henry. They're a team that was bottom 5 in passing last year and middle of the pack in rushing, and everyone knew that they were going to run the ball like 75% of the time. So they still had production running the ball, which is wild. If you can get someone like Quentin Johnston to make a defense honest and free up Derrick Henry, he's in line for a much better season than he had last year. It's weird to think that Derrick Henry finished in the top 5 in rushing last year.
And that's a down year.
Yeah, right.
That was a down year coming off foot surgery.
Yeah.
This is the team that needs offensive explosion. And if you pair Treylon Burks and Quentin Johnston, you are going to need to have somebody in the backfield. Because as mediocre as Jurgen says Ryan Tannehill is, he will be able to throw the ball over the top. That is where he excels in play action and the ability to hit guys down the field, or even run the ball when it's an obvious passing situation, because he's made a career of 5-yard rushing touchdowns as well. So look for them to make a move like this, and if they do and they can pull it off, this could be a huge push to get them back into playoff form.
What it does too is it also takes pressure off of Kyle Phillips and Nick Westbrook-Akeen, because those were guys that should not be number 2 receivers, and they would be under this current roster because Treylon Burks is your number 1. You slide Burks to the second slot, Johnson becomes your 1, and then you have a better wide receiver core. I like it. I think either way, Johnston or JSN, the Titans would go wide receiver here in a heartbeat at 11.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the pick. Fits a need. I wish Quinn Johnson didn't have to deal with Ryan Tannehill throwing him the ball, but you have to make
one more year. It's just one more year of this.
I was going to say, you have to make some sacrifices to get into the NFL, and playing with a mediocre quarterback has to be one of them. So, Rick, Texans at 12.
I mean, it has fallen to this way, and it's perfect. I love it too. I do. I do. If this happens for the Texans, this is the best thing. I understand that C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young are the 2 canvas guys right now, but Anthony Richardson has something special to his caliber. This is the guy who makes the playbook sing with all sorts of different plays that you don't even think about. And if you get him at 12 with the weapons that they have on their receiver core, and the fact that this is a team that you saw how good Dameon Pierce was last year as their rookie running back. You pair him with guys like John Mechie, who you think is going to come back, with Dalton Schultz, who is their new tight end. This is a home run. It's not a home run this year. Let's keep that in mind. Anthony Richardson is not going to be your starting quarterback week 1 in the NFL. He's not ready for that yet. But he's got all the intangibles for year 2 to become that guy and ascend to that role. And it fills up the quarterback room nicely. I think this is a home run hit for the Texans if it falls to them. And in this draft, it does. Anthony Richardson at 12 to Houston.
I don't blame it.
Sometimes it just works out that way.
Yeah.
I think it is. But again, what could you have taken JSN at this point? Sure. But again, does that solve the problem of you don't have a quarterback? No, it doesn't. Could you have taken a guy like Dalton Kincaid? Sure. But does it solve the don't have a quarterback question? No. Because Davis Mills isn't the future. He's the now. Case Keenum was the past. Anthony Richardson is your future. Yeah.
You have the prodigal son, the present, and the future all in one
Exactly.
quarterback room. It's almost like you have no quarterbacks. All right, Justin, Rick got to pick for his new team. You are now picking for your team and his former team. I guess you could say I don't even know what to describe it at this point.
Don't associate
My spurned lover.
Right.
Yeah, I was trying to think of something there, but you said it perfectly, Rick. All right, continuing the Sports Agents of Chaos 3-round mock. Justin picks for his Jets. Justin, who are the green and white taken here?
This as a Jets fan, it's hard actually because there's actually I think a number of different solid players here that I think can help them in spaces that they need. Plus, there are one or two guys that are not necessarily needed but hard to resist, especially someone like a JSN or a Lucas Van Ness. But I think you gotta go with the obvious pick here. Don't overthink it. Paris Johnson Jr. is the best fit for the Jets at the moment. They really need help at the tackle position, if not for just health reasons. I mean, how many linemen did they start last year at both tackle positions? It was all over the place. Paris Johnson is a 2-year starter. He's played a ton there. He's always rated highly. He's a true left tackle. He's got versatility, but listen, this is the guy at 6'6", 313. You're not going to pass up on a tackle like this, especially if you need to protect Aaron Rodgers.
Justin, you pair Paris Johnson with Max Mitchell as your tackles. I think that's beautiful. I really do.
Yeah,
because Max Mitchell was. Yeah, I mean,
comes back.
I think it's really good.
Nice. Yeah, I like the pick too. Paris Johnson Jr. Definitely, I think he's like the next offensive lineman to be taken aside from Scarante. And I think the best pure tackle right now in the class, especially here early on. So I definitely don't fault the selection as well. Definitely someone I think the Patriots would have considered taking here as well. So let's look at the New England Patriots and what they could do. They could use some defense. We know Bill Belichick loves his defense. They could definitely use some offensive line here. This is a little bit of a point in the draft where I need to kind of more so put on my draft helmet compared to what the Patriots tend to do. I'm going to be real with you. Their skill position is bad. It's not good. And whether Mac Jones, if you're going to try to give it one more run with him, or Bailey Zappi is the future of the franchise, they need a guy who could be an actual weapon for them. And I know this is maybe not what Belichick does, but the future is now, old man. You can't just run with the fact that you could always get certain players in the second, third, and fourth round. You don't have that team anymore. You don't have that quarterback that can make it happen anymore. And when you see definitive talent, you need to take advantage of it. He could be the number 2 option this year because TikTok boy, as A.J. Brown called him, it could be your temporary number 1 wide receiver. But I don't think it's a question. Whoever at this point in the draft, in this middle section of the draft, you need to run the damn card up there if Jackson Smith-Njigba is on the board. He's going to be my selection here for the New England Patriots. Again, you could say maybe it's not something Belichick would normally do, but you need to evolve with the game, and you can't run the ball 35 times anymore, Bill. Especially because you lost the guy who was supposed to be your number 1 running back in free. Like, get some skill position down in there, especially with the arms race that is the AFC East and the AFC as a whole. That's the only way you're going to be able to compete. So give me JSN going to New England.
Yeah, if he's there, stop the slide.
This whole middle section of the draft, if JSN is there and if the team doesn't select him, I think it's a lot of questioning that needs to occur.
So we've had 3 Ohio State guys taken in the first 14 picks, which just speaks to the credibility of Ryan Day's program over there. So I have the Packers pick at 15.
Is there?
And I'll tell you something. If JSN was there at 15, wouldn't that just be ironic for the Packers to take a wide receiver when they didn't have Aaron Rodgers.
We've been saying that if either Johnson or JSN is there, they're probably going wide receiver just to spite Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. So the back end of this first round wide receiver class includes guys like Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison. And I don't think either of those guys are top 15 material. You can probably get another wide receiver. Like I said, this is a deep wide receiver class. And, I think you have a greater need elsewhere. And I think your greater need elsewhere is at the tight end position for the Packers because John Tunyon's not there. And you're telling me that your tight end room was Austin Allen and Tyler Davis? No. They need a better tight end here. But it's not Dalton Kincaid. Michael Mayer has fallen down the draft boards for some reason. I don't know why. He plays with a reckless abandon that I think is absolutely what's needed. He was obviously the tight end one until recently in this draft. 6'4", plays with aggression, plays in line. He can block for Aaron Jones. He can run out and catch passes. I think he's a guy that can be the end-all, be-all, become the next great Green Bay tight end. I don't know who the last great Green Bay tight end was. Maybe Mercedes Lewis, but who knows where he's going to be. I think that Michael Mayer is a better NFL prospect than Dalton Kincaid. And so I think that fits that need. And it is somebody who can catch a pass. So Aaron Rodgers is like, really, guys? Really? But you know what? Let's start Jordan Love with Christian Watson in year 2 and Michael Mayer in year 1, and let's see what happens.
I'm with you there. I do like the selection. Michael Mayer Kincaid. I mean, I think it's debatable. I think you can go with either of them, or with in terms of being the first tight end off the board. But I'm cool with it. What do you think, Justin?
I think either one would be a good pick, and I do love the way this fits. I mean, they're going to need someone that can catch the ball, one, but also someone that you could put in and protect a guy like Jordan Love who's starting for the first year. I think this is a great pick for the Green Bay Packers.
Beautiful. All right, we move on. The Washington Commanders, my team. New ownership, by the way, for Washington, all things considered. So
the sun is finally shining on FedEx Field. Yay.
Who would have thought? All right, a lot of different ways you could go here if you're Washington. I think so if we just look at needs, there's no definitive first-round linebacker in this class, I feel. There are some decent guys, maybe more in the second round. I don't think you're going to get your linebacker here in the first round. Quarterback, I think the plan they're going with, I think they want to give Howell a fair shot, at which Jacoby Brissett is the backup. There it is. So I think it is looking at the offensive line or another part of the secondary that is fine for them, but I think could use some improvement is corner. But I don't necessarily think you need to hit corner in the first round. I think with corner, I think this is an underratedly deep class. I think you could still have a chance at getting a pretty solid cornerback in the second round. Maybe third round is when we start to get a little bit shaky with that, but I think there still could be a corner or two in the second round that I think you'd be cool with taking. So with my pick here, I'm going to go offensive line. And I know it says guard and center are the needs, and I do agree with that, relatively speaking. But there's still, I don't think the offensive tackle is anywhere near set in terms of that team. I think one of the guys there is Charles Leno. I think he's 30 or close to it. You need a little bit of youth there. So it's all about who do you want to take, who is ranked higher. I know he's technically not ranked as high on the board compared to some of the guys here, but I think a guy who's definitely getting the hype as he should. This might technically be an overdraft by PFF standards, but I think for the most part, you look at the offensive tackles, I think this is relatively a guy who's the third or fourth ranked offensive tackle in this draft class. I'm going with Broderick Jones out of Georgia. Look, the SEC is home to offensive linemen who know how to deal with top-tier pass rushers, and you're going into NFC East where you have Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence on the Cowboys. You got that Philadelphia Eagles defensive line. You got Kayvon Thibodeau on the Giants. You need your offensive line to be top-tier. I wouldn't be shocked if the Commanders honestly go with offensive line in both their first and second round selection. They need as much offensive line help as they can get. Give me Broderick Jones. Sadly, he must join the Red Scare. He must join the Red Storm. He must go play with the Commanders with the 16th overall pick.
This is the guy that I saw the Jets possibly taking at 13 too, because he plays with a great reckless abandon. I think the one thing that he has to figure out how to do is not punch, because a lot of his college tape is him punching when the defensive line is charging at him. He's got to learn how to latch on. Yeah. So, you can teach that pretty easily.
Especially, I feel like Ron Rivera would be the coach to help teach
100%. Eric Bieniemy as well.
Yeah.
Their associate head coach.
Exactly. All right. The Pittsburgh Steelers. At number 17, we have a Justin run finally, the run that people have been waiting for. We have Justin here for 3 picks in a row, starting with the Steelers.
Now, I do want to say before Justin makes his pick, there's a guy here that if the Steelers do not take him at 17 is like sacrilege. Total sacrilege. But I want to see what Justin thinks.
I feel the pressure. I will tell you. So
I think I know who Rick is talking about.
I have no idea who Rick is talking about, but I'm going to pick who I want to pick anyways. So
go for it.
I think
I was going to say, when do you listen to Rick, Justin?
Never.
Sure,
well, you're the one who listened to me with the Commanders last year. Look how that worked out.
Yeah. Well, maybe, Justin, don't listen to him.
Sure, you have free will.
So, in my mind, when you think Steelers, you think one thing, and you think punishing defense, and that's where they have to go. There were some issues last year, and I know that there were injuries all across that team, and I think that they're a team that will be greatly improved even with no additions, just due to the returning health that they'll have. But there was one glaring hole, I think, last year that really put them behind the 8 ball late in the season. I know they did still have a chance to make the playoffs, but they lost a lot of games due to touchdowns thrown late in games. They gave up what's tied for the second most passing touchdowns in the league last year in 29 against that defense. And I really think that they need to address that secondary. In my mind, the best way to do that would be drafting Brian Branch out of Alabama. I think he is an excellent secondary player. He's going to fill a need there. He's a natural leader, and he's played at a high level for a long time. And I think that that's an excellent fit in that defense. Rick, did I disappoint you?
Yes, you did immensely. But it's okay, because I agree with you that Brian Branch would have been an excellent pick there. But I'll tell you this, if he falls to 22,
nepotism,
Baltimore could take Joey Porter Jr. and just really irritate the Steelers faithful. I think that'd be hilarious. Because I agree. Brian Branch is safety, Joey Porter is a corner. I agree. Either they need a lot of help in the secondary, so I think either one is the best call there.
Well, I have bad news for you, Rick. He's not going to fall that far. He's not going to the Lions here, though. The Lions do need defensive help, but I think that they are going to go with Lucas Van Ness. I think that pairing him up with Aiden Hutchinson last year is going to make that a fearsome defense. And again, they definitely need help in the secondary, especially with trading their former first overall pick. What did you say?
Jeff Okudah.
Yeah, Jeff Okudah to the Falcons earlier in the month. But Lucas Van Ness is a guy that I think will be a force to be reckoned with, especially when he's not going to be doubled, because they're really going to have to get after Aiden Hutchinson and some other guys along that defensive line. Pencil me in for Lucas Van Ness for the Lions. And last but not least, we have one of the big question marks since the retiring of their Hall of Fame quarterback, Tom Brady.
No idea what
they need a lot. They need a lot. And there's one position in particular that I have been harping on for a long time with them, and that is secondary play. They lost Jordan Whitehead to the Jets last year, and they honestly had some struggles the year before that, and I don't think it was addressed properly. So I think they'll go at this in the draft. They're going to take Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State, Rick's guy. It's just an excellent fit in my mind. It's something that I think Todd Bowles is really going to want. He's a obviously defensive-minded head coach, and they really need to fix that secondary. Their defensive line has played well. They'll address other things like their linebacker situation with Devin White, who wants to trade. But this is the best move for them going forward. You got to solidify that defense, and you'll worry about the issues on the offensive side of the ball later, especially since you have still pretty good receivers there in Godwin and Evans.
I agree. And I also don't think it makes sense for them to take a quarterback this high up. I mean, if the top 4 guys are gone, there's no reason for them to reach for a quarterback.
Exactly.
So this fits a great need for them. Kincaid would have been a good option too, because they do need a tight end. Because I know Cameron Brate had a bit of a rough year last year as well. But Porter's a great fit for what they need.
But you know what? I feel like taking a tight end is such a luxury pick. You know what I mean? You take a tight end in the first round when you think that's a piece that might put your offense over the edge in a playoff contending roster. I think I liked it with the Packers because, one, it's not that I think that Jordan Love is going to come out firing like a Hall of Fame quarterback, but their defense was excellent last year with a ton of injuries. And I think that they're also very young and they're well coached. So I expect that Packers defense to be a top caliber D next year. And they do have some weapons, even if there was some issues last year with Aaron Rodgers there. I mean, their young receivers in Dobbs and Watson were both banged up. They will need a receiver, which I think they'll address later in the draft like they always do. But the tight end fit in that situation. It doesn't – there are so many more glaring needs than a half block or half pass catcher kind of in-between player. And I don't think it makes sense for the Bucs to make that move at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I just think that that's somebody that if he's still there, even Michael Mayer's still there, you might consider it. But you're right. The glaring need for them is in secondary defensive back play. So Joey Porter's a good fit. Deontay Banks is a great athlete too. But I like Porter going to the Bucs at 19.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Seattle Seahawks here. My selection. This is interesting to say the very least. So what defense went with Tyree Wilson with the higher pick for them, so we helped with the defensive side of things, at least on the defensive line. Linebacker with Bobby Wagner back in the fold, you have that veteran there. I think he's very solid still. He wasn't as bad last season as a lot of people are saying he was. I think like you're good on that end. And again, I just don't think there's a definitive linebacker here you could take in the first round that is worth the value perception wise. Corner is a consideration, because while there's other solid young corners on the team, such as a Kobe Bryant, I'm not even making a joke there, literally Kobe Bryant on that team, and Mike Jackson is solid there, the 26-year-old. Like, corner's certainly in consideration. You have some weapons there, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker. Tight end could stand for improvement, but I actually like some of the guys that are available in the second and third round for tight end. I think there could be a steal or two here, very much worthy in that regards. So, all that being said, the Houston Texans aren't the only team that are going to take a project quarterback here in the first round. With my pick, at the 20th overall selection, again, I don't care what Pro Football Focus has to say in this regard, I'm going with Hendon Hooker for the Seahawks as the quarter. I made Justin leave the stream. I made him leave. Look, this is the value. Listen. This is the value of having 2 first-round picks. I like Damian Lewis at the guard spot next to Charles Cross. Again, this is a deep offensive line class. I think you could go offensive line in the second or third round. The defense could still definitely use some work. I'm not denying that, but they made acquisitions. If you get that Tyree Wilson with your 5th overall pick, you add a massive block there. Again, corner, very much heavy in consideration, but why not secure your backup developing quarterback for the next 2 years, which is basically what Geno Smith's contract guarantees are for the next 2 seasons. And you bring in a guy to learn the whole playbook over the next year or two. Hendon Hooker to Seattle at 20.
I am floored. It's.
Have I lost both of you?
Wow.
I was here the whole time.
Wow, I was too, but I'm in shock.
Well,
wow.
Justin, your camera was off.
I know. I'm sorry, but I was listening. Listen, we've spoke about this. Jurgen and I have gone back and forth. I didn't necessarily think it was actually going to happen, but I mean, I loved Hendon Hooker coming out this year. I think that if you're okay with his medicals and you think that this is a guy that can be down the road, it's quite a swing for the fences. I'll give you that.
I mean, this throws off what I had going for the end of the first round and the middle of the second round, but Wow.
This is the thing here. We're playing with no drafts, and I know no trades, excuse me. I know Rick especially would have taken him from me.
No, I mean, I would have, but I wouldn't have taken him in the position where you're thinking of taking him. So I got to now adjust what I was about to do. But yeah, I mean, if you like Hendon Hooker enough, and a lot of teams do, he's a guy that can fit, then can be the guy. The one thing that I have that concerns me a bit is something that Velus Jones also had as well. He's a bit of an older rookie. He's 25. So you're working against the clock by taking him now. So that means that if you go through a fifth-year option, he's going to be 30. So it's a project. It's a risk. But you said it. You have 2 first-round picks for a reason. Take a risk if you can. Absolutely.
Yeah. This is the value of having that second first-round pick. Like, you firmly have the opportunity here to take an extra guy that maybe more so you wouldn't have considered taking. But again, if we're going with the idea of no trades here, and Seattle, I think Seattle is one of the teams that's going to consider Hendon Hooker. Very much possibility this could happen.
I agree.
Very much possibility. All right, let's try to get things back on track here with the Los Angeles Chargers, who I'm also selecting for. So,
oh, God.
The fun only be continuing here with our mock draft. All right.
Did you get Irish all of a sudden?
The Los Angeles Chargers. Who do I want to take with the Chargers? Could they use a backup quarterback? No, I'm obviously joking.
They have Easton Stick. Come on now.
Yeah. All right. Wait, what'd you say, Justin? I did not hear you.
Who has the Dolphins? Who had to forfeit their pick?
PFF forfeited the pick. All right.
Yeah. Nobody has the Dolphins?
No, because
they lost their first,
pick.
remember?
Stephen Ross, the Tampa.
It was a 3-round mock. Somebody has the Dolphins.
Yeah, not now.
No. Later.
I want to make fun of whoever had to forfeit their pick in the first round. That's all I'm saying.
Who is picking for the Dolphins real quick?
Aren't you?
That's me. Yeah, that's me.
Oh, well,
I'm not the one that lost the pick.
Your mustache is absurd.
It's because of it's still better than Vince McMahon's.
That's true. God.
You know what? The Hendon Hooker pick made them forfeit that first round pick.
That's fair. Very fair.
All right. It could go. Honestly, I see that the top 2 guys I'm considering with this selection are right there for the Chargers. It's all about what do you want to go. They've suffered with injuries over the last couple of years in the secondary, which makes me want to consider taking Deontay Banks, who I think is being underrated on a lot of draft boards. I'm not understanding why people are falling out of love with Deontay Banks. I think he's a really good corner. But this is another thing me and Justin have talked about. We've considered it. Tight end, the Chargers have lost that security blanket from when they lost Hunter Henry a couple of years ago. They just have not been able to fill it. I need to go with it. I think this is a combo of best player available plus need. Give me Dalton Kincaid out of Utah going to the Chargers at 21.
Great selection for them. You're right. They need a tight end in that room, and that's another guy who can fit Justin Herbert's mold and mindset for basically catching anything thrown his way. Really good stuff there.
Yes, sir. All right. Me and Rick are about to go back-to-back like the Kings and the Blackhawks in the 2010s. Rick has the Ravens, then I got the Vikings, then Rick has the Jags, and I have the Giants.
So I'm going to make this nice and short and sweet. We're going Clemson with this Baltimore pick because here's the thing. The wide receiver room, I agree, it's a need, but they just got Odell Beckham. They've got all their guys coming back from injury, so they don't need a new wide receiver now. Corners the same way. They have Marlon Humphrey. They drafted Jalen Armour-Davis. I think that's set. The edge position, though, they lost Calais Campbell. They need to get somebody in there that's really going to be good. And while I'm tempted to go with Brian Bressie, I think Miles Murphy is a much better prospect. He's 6'5". He's got a lot of high-end power, and I think he's a very, very good person who could be an every down edge for the Ravens and could become that next Calais Campbell. I love the way he plays. I think he's talented. I think he'll fit that system perfectly, and I think he will really become a cornerstone for the second Ravens defense we're about to see going forward, because the first one just ended. So the second one's going to start with Miles Murphy here. That's 1 and 2.
Rick, I agree with you. I think Miles Murphy is someone that, obviously because I had the Seahawks pick, it made a little bit different. Same with the Raiders. But I think the Falcons, I think he could go as high as 8. I think Miles Murphy is a really talented guy. Again, Pro Football Focus does their math a little bit different with some of these. Some of the guys that they have ranked higher up in this draft are not necessarily first-round picks or are rated higher in other, draft prospect boards overall. But Miles Murphy is a guy I definitely see. He could be taken in the top 10, maybe in the later part of the top 10, or even in the early portion of the teens, 11 through 16, I think is definitely a possibility. If Washington wasn't so stacked on the defensive line already, I would even consider Miles Murphy there. Or if they had already traded a Montez Sweat who could potentially be traded. We talked about guys who could be dealt. I think that could also be a guy there as well. All right, Minnesota Vikings. God, what could I do for these frauds? I could do a lot here, honestly. I look at this team. I said it last year, and I'll say it again. The defense was supremely young, and you need to go with something and somebody here on the defensive side of the ball to really help out there. The corners were fine last year, but they were getting injured a lot. I think 2 of their top 3 corners are like going into the season, both ended up getting hurt. You need some more depth, and I think you just need more higher end talent on that end of things. And especially again in that division, if the Bears and the Lions are going to take a little bit of a resurgence here that you're expecting, those teams have good skill position. Give me a guy who could be my number 1 corner, if not at least my number 2. I'll just keep it simple. Deontay Banks to Minnesota with the 23rd overall pick. I think again, Deontay Banks for some people is like kind of falling out later in the first round, maybe even early second round. I don't know why. I think he's actually pretty talented. I think he's good with his hands. I think he's very good at keeping up with guys. I like Deontay Banks personally, so I'm going with him at Minnesota.
I have Jacksonville then, right, at 2024?
Yes,
I mean, look, I love Deontay Banks as well, but the last time I talked about a Maryland secondary guy was Nick Cross, and that didn't really go very well for me last year, so we'll skip that and move on. Jacksonville's interesting because I could introduce you to a center prospect who could become a first-round guy. Because I think there's a center prospect who could be a first-round guy. Because I know Cesar Ruiz wasn't really a first-round guy, but I'm going to go with like this. When your top guard is Brandon Sheriff, who's 31 years old, you need to get a new guard in there in that room. I think the best guard available for Jacksonville, and the guy who I've loved in this spot, is Osiris Torrance out of Florida. So I have him going at 24 to Jacksonville. There has never been a more guard prospect of a guard than Osiris Torrance. And you know what? You need an interior guy to really help out, protect Trevor Lawrence here. Torrance is 6'5", 330. He basically has like the strength that makes Samson blush, is the best way I can put it. And so I think this is a guy who will go right into that spot, will fit right into that mold, either guard position, doesn't matter which one, and he will make a difference on day 1. Osiris Torrance to the Jaguars. Could have been a guy the Giants could have taken at 25, but I think here at 24 for Jacksonville, it's the best fit.
Absolutely. Definitely would have considered him. I think he's definitely supremely talented in that aspect of things, for sure. So I like Osiris Torrance personally. And to me, he's on the all-name first team in this draft, obviously.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You can't argue with that.
Just a beautiful name. All right, Osiris Torrance to Jacksonville. My turn now with the Giants. Giants are in an interesting position here. They're a team that definitely needs wide receiver, and you could definitely start considering wide receiver once again at this portion of the draft as we get to the late first, early second round portion. Center, again, I'm kind of with you, Rick. Like I have been trying to reevaluate the centers, and I think there are some guys here with these first couple of names that you see that could be taking if you're the Giants. But again, I also think like in terms of where you're selecting, I think there's still going to be players available. If only Cam Jurgens was in this draft class, he definitely would have been a first-round pick. But, yes, there's bias there. But in all seriousness, I do think that the Giants just need to add weapons. Look, you've paid Danny Dimes now. You need to help him become Danny Dollar Signs with the contract you've paid him, and he needs skill position weapons. You like that name there, Justin?
Love that.
So, yeah. If we're going to try to help Danny Dollar Signs here, we got to go wide receiver. I love this guy when he was in the ACC, and I think he still had a pretty good year in the Pac-12. Give me Jordan Addison to the Giants. I know there's a couple things. I know he's a little bit smaller than people are expecting. I know there's this and that, but this is still a Biletnikoff winner. This is still a guy who has done damage with talented quarterbacks that he's worked with. I love Jordan Addison personally. I think he's supremely talented. I think he's going to be I know the Giants have had deep threats on this team, technically speaking, but I think he's a very sneaky guy who he can work at all 3 levels for them, and I think that's more so what they need. I think he's a great young player to add to that skill position group that just needs more. They need an infusion of talent. I think Jordan Addison is the kind of guy that adds to that wide receiver room.
I agree with you, and I think that Jordan Addison is the best of the tier 2 wide receivers in this draft. I think Johnson and JSN are your clear tier 1s. And I like Addison because I like his height. If you try to pitch the Giants on drafting Zay Flowers again, they're going to say, we have Wan'Dale Robinson. It's exactly the same guy. Yeah. Addison's a little taller and can be a better threat, I think. So I agree with you. I think it might not be the thing they wanted, but you're right. Center prospects, you can get them in the second round. I know they lost John Feliciano in the offseason, but get another weapon because Richie James wasn't really your guy, even though he led the team in receptions last year for some ungodly reason.
All right. I think we're about to head into a very interesting portion of the draft here, to say the very least. And it starts with Justin picking with the Dallas Cowboys here at 26. Justin, the Cowboys, they believe they could challenge the Eagles for the NFC East this year. I think most would say they are the definitive second best team in the NFC East. They've had an interesting offseason. They've added Brandon Cooks. They've lost Ezekiel Elliott. You know, they added Stephon Gilmore to that secondary. There's some talent there. I mean, Cowboys almost always have talent. Who are they going to go with the 26th overall pick?
You know, it slaps you in the face, but they're going to have to go from one first round running back to a different the next first round running back, and that is Bijan Robinson. I think he's the best fit here. He was an excellent player in college, the highest rated running back on Pro Football Focus board. Look, he's someone that fits what they're trying to do. He could do so many things. He's had 30 touchdowns there in 3 years. He's been excellent. Yeah. It's the best pick. They can't overthink this. This is exactly what I think the Cowboys will do come draft day. But I mean, assuming he's there, but this is the best move for them.
I'm with you. I agree. I think again, shout out to my guy Stu. He has, because again, you're talking about a team with multiple first round picks. He has Bijan Robinson potentially going as high as number 10 to the Eagles with their spot there, because again, he's supremely talented. If there is a running back that definitively is a first round talent in this draft class, it is Bijan Robinson. He is a beast, to say the very least. Any comments, Rick?
I'm a little surprised, but I think this is a very good fit for them. I do. I think that this is again, you don't know what Tony Pollard is, and I know you just added, I believe they added Ronald Jones, right, in the offseason. Dallas did?
Yeah.
So it might be filling up that room a little bit and making it a little crowded, but Robinson's a player, man. He is a great bell cow running back. He's a feature guy. He will be a star in Dallas. And you saw last year at Texas, almost 1,600 yards on the ground. This is a guy who knows where to find the opening and just go. And you know what? In a year that for some people are saying this year could be a make or break year for Dak Prescott. Surround him with all the weapons you can. That way, it works, and it's a make year instead of a break year. So yeah. I agree.
Absolutely. All right. Bills 27. They definitely could have gone with Bijan Robinson. This is certainly a team that a lot of people are mocking Robinson to go to if he were to fall all the way down the boards. Certainly Dallas. Again, we talked earlier in the show, first round trades that could happen. I think if Bijan Robinson is available, maybe even starting around the Vikings or the Jaguars pick, I think teams will be calling to trade up a couple spots to get a guy like that are conceivably are running back away or could use a very high caliber running back. I'm not saying any team would do it. I'm saying a specific group of teams here would do that. So we have the Buffalo Bills. It says needs our defensive back. That sounds about right. They've had some injuries in the secondary the last couple of years that they could use that support for. So defensive back certainly makes sense on this team, to say the very least. And I think that all things considered, you could argue maybe offensive line to add a little bit of insurance there, because that offensive line, I mean, for the most part is healthy, but you do have a couple veterans there in a Mitch Morris, in a Deion Dawkins, but I think they still have a couple years ahead of them. I would actually briefly consider wide receiver here, because all the weapons not named Stephon Diggs was just an absolute failure for this team last season. And I think they need a little bit more in the skill position room. I know you could argue, well, they did just sign Damian Harris and they have James Cook as the backup running back. That's why I'm saying Bijan Robinson would very much be a guy. I think the Bills would actually be willing to trade this first round pick up for a couple spots to the Jaguars or the Vikings or a team of that caliber, or even the Giants if he's there at 25, because I definitely think the Giants would more than willing trade with the Bills if it screws over the Cowboys in any way, shape, or form. That for certain. But I will be going cornerback, because I think the Bills need a little bit more depth at the corner spot because of injuries. And I got a couple guys here who I could run with. Emmanuel Forbes has proven to be a bit of a ball hawk. And he's very tempting. I think either of these guys you can't go wrong with. A guy who's gaining some traction, I don't think he'll end up being a first-round pick, is a Tyreek Stevenson out of Miami. I think he's very much become one of these risers who I don't think, again, not first-rounder, but middle, even early second round. I think he's becoming a popular selection to a lot of people. So I think that's going to be the case. So between Forbes and Smith, I don't necessarily feel one way over the other, but if I had to try to guess what the Bills could go with, I think they're going to go with a guy who could be a ball hawk like some of the guys in that secondary. So give me Emmanuel Forbes going to the Buffalo Bills here at 27.
Forbes would have been my guy at 28 for the Bengals because they do need a second defensive back in the secondary as well because he's an excellent player. He really is, and I think that he checks a lot of the boxes that you would want in a defensive back. So that's going to lead to me to go 28, and I'm gonna surprise you, as I have already in this first round.
I don't think anyone's did a bigger surprise than me.
Well, just wait, just wait. Because I'm not done. I mean, I'm done after this pick because of the Saints, but I'm not done in the first round. I think a very sneaky, underrated need for the Bengals is running back. And I think if Bijan Robinson was here, I think that he would be the guy that you would take absolutely. However, he's not. So I think the next best guy is a guy that PFF ranks at a 92 on their draft board. A guy who is 6 foot, who rushed for 1,358 yards last year, out of the University of California, Los Angeles, Zach Charbonnet will go to Cincinnati at number 28. I love the way he runs. I think that he is an excellent spell for Joe Mixon because, again, look at the Bengals running back room. It's Joe Mixon, Travion Williams, and Chris Evans. That's it. You need something else. Maybe Elijah Holyfield's there too, but So get a feature back who can spell for Joe Mixon and get somebody who also has a pretty good radius for catching the ball too. 37 catches last year, 320 yards out of a UCLA backfield that was interesting. So I think he might be going a little high. This is a reach, but I think the Bengals have an embarrassment of riches here where if a corner's there, you take him. But if not, you try and fill out a skill position need. And that's why I think Zach Charbonnet is going to go to the Bengals.
I love Zach Charbonnet. I've fallen in love with him in the late draft process here. I think he's great. I think he could break tackles. I think the kid bounces off contact well. I think he's certainly – I know Spears is supposed to be the second running back. I think Charbonnet, I think you could argue between him and Spears. But if you are dead set on Spears being your second guy, I think Charbonnet is the number 3 running back in this class for sure.
I think so too, yeah.
He's an amazing guy. I think even the Eagles, if they don't take a Bijan Robinson with their picker, if he's off the board, or maybe between him and Spears, I think the Eagles would even consider it as well. I think Charbonnet is really good.
Yeah.
Bengals, another guy I would have considered because I'm up with the Saints here, so I could talk about it. I think the Bengals, excuse me. One guy I would have slightly considered is Darnell Wright, who's right there on screen out of Tennessee, because Jonah Williams is now said to be unhappy with the fact he needs to be the right tackle. And I would just trade Jonah Williams in this draft class, get a couple picks. Maybe I think you get a second round pick for him this year, maybe like a second or a third next year. You get a couple picks for a guy who, let's be real here. If he's going to be a free agent next year, if he's unhappy, he's not going to want to stay on the team. Right. So you get a couple picks for a guy, and I think Darnell Wright could have been a nice slip in. But I don't blame your selection at all.
Yeah.
Speaking of selections, let's go to the Saints here. Saints are certainly interesting. They're still sort of recovering from all the cap hell they've been through. So there is something to say about here. I think there's an extra need or two that it's not even saying on the board here if you're the Saints. I definitely think that offensive line is interesting because you would think on paper their offensive line is really strong. You got McCoy, you got Ruiz, you got Ramczyk, you got all those guys. But contracts are due, and Cesar Ruiz is due a deal. And are they going to be able to keep him in the fold? Are they going to be able to do all those salary cap gymnastics, especially because they paid Derek Carr? Now, did they overpay him via market value? Who knows? But it is something to consider here. So I think I'm very tempted here to maybe quote-unquote overdraft a guy here because of that need. And my guy is here. He could play guard. I think he could play center. He could do either one. I'm going to go with Steve Avila out of TCU. I think they did lose a good bit on the defensive line, and I wouldn't have been against picking D-line, but I think you're playing the long game. You just are really recovering if you're the Saints from the salary cap hell, but now you just paid a quarterback. You need to be smart here. And if you aren't convinced you're going to pay a guy past the season, you got to get his replacement. And I think Steve Avila would be the perfect replacement there for Cesar Ruiz. You give him a year. And also, honestly, you may have to still do some shifting all the offensive line because like I said last week in our draft busts section, Trevor Penning only played, 5-6 games last season, only started 1. So if Penning is still going to have injury issues and you need to shift the offensive line a little bit, Avila might be starting a little bit quicker than what we're expecting here. So that is my selection with Steve Avila to the Saints. Oh, and the Saints Oh, what the Saints? All right, no, I'm not going to sing. All right, back-to-back picks here to end this. Justin does not want to hear the acapella. Back-to-back picks here to end the first round. Finally, we're getting to the end of the first. Eagles and Chiefs here before Justin takes over with the Steelers to start the second round. And we have a little bit of a Justin run coming up in the early second round, ladies and gentlemen. Don't you dare worry. All right, Rick, who you going with here?
So this is where I think the Eagles will go wide receiver. Again, I think the more pressing need is on the defensive interior. And honestly, Zay Flowers and Josh Downs are basically the same guy, if you think about it. I mean, they're both the same height. They both have the same slot speed. I think, though, that of the two of them, I think that Zay Flowers has an incredible speed that can just come from anywhere. And so if I'm the Eagles, I want to pair him with Devontae Smith and with A.J. Brown and make him my slot guy. Because if Quez Watkins is going to go, I want to have a replacement there. So I think Zay Flowers out of Boston College will go to the Eagles at number 30. Now, this is where Hendon Hooker would have gone for me to the Chiefs. Because
why?
I'll tell you, Kansas City has an embarrassment of riches at a lot of other positions. I know it's the wide receiver and D-line. I kind of agree with that, but I think the one thing that they're missing is that they don't have a good backup quarterback. They lost Chad Henne. He retired. So Shane Buechele is their backup quarterback. And sure, you could say, well, they'll just wait until like the third round or fourth round and pick Clayton Tune or pick Jake Hayner or one of these guys. But I ain't doing that. Remember how in the beginning of the show we said there could be 6 quarterbacks going in the first round?
No way.
Kansas City Chiefs, Tanner McKee, number 31.
Okay.
Now there's a reason why, aside from me being crazy. Doesn't this feel like a Patrick Mahomes-esque type of pick where you're going to sit McKee for a few years, let him figure things out? And sure, you've got Mahomes locked up for a long time, but look at what Chad Henne was able to do. Look what Chad Henne was able to do as the backup quarterback for this team. Tanner McKee is 6'6". He will provide a different sort of mindset in this mold, and I really think this could be a sneaky pick. I know it's not a popular pick. I know it's not. But at the same time, I think this could be a good selection here for Kansas City. Take a project. I know Mahomes is still young and he's the best player in the world. Who better to learn from? Because if you learn from somebody who's the best player in the world, let's look at this. What did New England get for Jimmy Garoppolo?
Second round pick.
You could probably turn that into a second round pick later on because McKee's probably not going to play a whole lot. But if you can turn him into a pick who becomes a really good player for somebody else, that's forward thinking that the Kansas City Chiefs might do here. So,
Rick, I hear you, but Justin has been raising his hand like it's a Zoom function. So
no, I know. I want him to keep that hand up. I want him to keep stretching, stretching that hand up.
Justin, yes, we select you, Mr. Zucker.
Okay, actually,
this is a Pringle you take here, by the way.
My question has changed actually since the pick happened and the explanation. So I just want to clarify. Did you say they should pick a backup quarterback with 31 so that they could trade him for a second round pick later?
The Chiefs have. So it is an argument, but here's the main crux of it too is that right now, if Patrick Mahomes gets hurt, who's there?
I agree with you. And that's fine. Maybe he'll play like 3 games in a season, or maybe he'll play 10 games in one season. Now, your other argument was you want him to sit and learn behind Patrick Mahomes so that when Patrick Mahomes is gone, maybe he's good. Didn't he just sign like a 10-year? Didn't he sign like a 10-year contract like a year ago?
But you know what? Too, this is the game is unpredictable. Let's say. So what if Mahomes?
But it's not that unpredictable. You have a team that just came off the Super Bowl. They're gone to 5 straight AFC Championship games, and your argument for a first-round pick is to take a backup quarterback that will either sit behind the best quarterback in the league for 10 plus years, or we could trade him for a worse draft pick than we just took him at.
I mean, the value I think of
it building upon a already championship roster.
I don't think that Kansas City needs to build on the roster as much as everyone's saying that they do.
I would disagree with that. I think
why wouldn't you stay good? Why wouldn't you supplement your weaknesses because they weren't a perfect team. There's no such thing as a perfect team. The Kansas City Chiefs, I believe, are the only team that gave up more passing touchdowns last year than the Steelers and a couple of other teams. Why not address their secondary concerns? They had some issues at wide receiver. They lost arguably one of their best receivers last year. Why not take a receiver? Why would you take a backup?
They cut Frank Clark. They need
because
on the defensive line.
Okay,
right?
because I think we all saw last year that Kadarius Toney can actually play when given the opportunity to play. And I think that was a bonus for them. It was somebody that was
Hardman and Juju Smith-Schuster also, and they cut someone.
But they
also didn't work out. Well, I mean, he might be better next year, but
right. But
you
they
need
also
more than 2 receivers.
They also added. Well, they have MVS as well, so he's a guy that you can definitely work on with that. But here's the thing: when you're picking at 31, I don't think the receivers that are there at 31 can justify. They're basically the same mold as a Tony or a Richie James.
Well, but then,
I don't think there's a guy who can be a number one receiver.
There's other players and positions. I mean, they could use some defensive line. You know, Brian Brees is still available. You said that they just lost Orlando Brown. Maybe they would want to take Darnell Wright. There's so many other positions that I think that you could address successfully. Like, there's no point to me in the arguments that you just made.
Oh, Justin, real quick. Rick, I will go through because I wrote down all our selections. I will give you a chance to make up this pick. I will reset it. I will reload the site. I will pick each one, and I will let you pick somebody else.
No,
I don't know if Tanner McKee's the guy here, dude.
So I think that
no matter how crazy they
are. So I think as well that while the talent is there, I think that the depth is a little bit better at offensive line, and I can't justify the Chiefs taking a 4th round or 5th round quarterback here as somebody who's going to become the backup. But I can see them taking in the 2nd round. I can see them in the 2nd round taking somebody at a tackle like a Cody Mock, who's probably going to be there for them, who's also a swing guy, or a defensive end who might also be there as well.
It's not like they had like Anthony Richardson or Will Levis here either. They took a guy that was probably going in the 2nd or 3rd round or even the 4th round.
That's the thing, Rick. Tanner McKee is not going up draft boards.
It's like, not only is it a huge reach, but the logic just isn't there, man. Like, we've disagreed on a lot of things. This one is mine. Like,
Hendon Hooker don't look too bad at Tony now, Justin.
You thought Hendon Hooker was a bad pick? This one is blowing my mind right now, Rick. I know that you know football better than this.
Justin, I made a good 1st round pick now. Did I not?
I told you I liked it. I liked Hendon Hooker. I think if it wasn't for an injury, he would be proving his stuff in the combines right now. He would be proving himself on pro days, and he would be one of those names that's up there with Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. I don't necessarily know if it would have been a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young, but that's a kid that's got talent. I'm not saying Tanner McKee has no talent, but he's not a 1st round guy. He's not going to go to a 2nd round
guy. Like, respectfully, he might go in the 3rd round.
That has the best quarterback because he might get hurt one day. And to the idea of using a 1st round pick on him to either have him sit for 10 years behind a starter, or maybe you could trade that 1st round pick for a 2nd round pick in 3 years. I'm going to pick for the Steelers now. I can't. There's nothing. I will
say my last note about this, and I will let you pick Justin. Tanner McKee was born on April 27th, so the 1st round is April 27th. So Rick made him a 1st round pick for his birthday. I guess,
it would be the ultimate birthday wish come true because I think there's a better chance of me being a princess tomorrow. Let's see here. There's a lot of picks for the Steelers, but I mean, this is who I thought that Rick was going to take. I'm going to go with Darnell Wright. It's a need that they have. They need to have an improvement on the offensive line, and I would take over Tanner McKee.
That's going to be the analysis for the next couple of picks. I would take him over Tanner McKee.
I'm sorry. I'm going to give you a hard time about this one.
All right. Well, Rick will try to, recount himself and pick for the Texans here before we get the little mini Justin run. So, Rick, who are the Texans picking at 33rd with 33rd overall pick? That may or may not be better than Tanner McKee. That's the standard now for the draft. So
I would have even picked Tanner McKee here, and I wouldn't have argued with it. Like, they could use all the shots at quarterback they could get. I don't see it in the 1st round.
Texans use every single pick aside from Will Anderson on a quarterback. Just get as many guys in there as possible.
One of 3 teams that absolutely in no way, shape, or form needs to take a quarterback in the first round.
Rick, we did this out of love, but God damn it, man, that was a pick. You make me look sane with going Hendon Hooker at 20.
Yeah, well, I have my reasons. I think it would work, but that's why I'm in the position that I'm in. And yeah. Texans here at this pick will take Will McDonald the 4th from Iowa State. He's an explosive guy, a good linebacker. I think it's a fit that they would need to also add in with Will Anderson. You could argue for a wide receiver in the spot, but like I said, I think that the class is deep enough, and they've got 2 third-round picks, so I think they can get another guy that's another edge guy and try and work out on that mold. So, yeah, I think that he's also a very good college player, so I think that he's a guy that can work out that system and really try and shape up. Because you know what, I think you want as many bodies as possible to throw at whoever the Colts take for quarterback, to try and confuse him and try and get him, out of his rhythm. So that's why I think Will McDonald will be a good fit here in this mindset.
Will McDonald had a farm. E-I-E-I-O. No, I think it's a pretty good selection. Again, you have a defensive head coach now, D'Amico Ryans. You definitely want to give him weapons to work on defensively. And I think if the Texans, I know we had them split it in this mock, but if they go maybe quarterback and receiver in their first 2 picks come the NFL draft, defense is certainly something I think they could go after because they need the talent, to say the very least. All right, Justin, we get a run here for you. We get 3 selections in a row here with the Cardinals, the Colts, and the Rams. Let's start with the Arizona Cardinals, who earlier in this draft, you had them take the defensive lineman out of Georgia, Jalen Carter. So who are the Cardinals going with here?
That is a good question. So there's a lot of needs for this team, I'm gonna make the argument that you need to build from the line out, and they're gonna need to go defense, and I think they're gonna need to go defensive line. They've done a lot of work on their offensive line. They've done well, but they're gonna need some pressure, and they're gonna need some run stopping, and I think that they're gonna have to go. You see, I'm back and forth on this now because
I think I know who you're back and forth with.
It would almost be sacrilege to take 2 defensive interior guys back to back, right? But Brian Brees is just such a solid player, and I think he would benefit really well next to Jalen Carter outside of Georgia. But then you could also pair him up back with his running mate Nolan Smith from Georgia and really get after the quarterback on the edge. He's a great athlete. He can really get after.
Do you not consider a tackle in Anton Harrison? Because I think the Cardinals' offensive line was all right last year, but it wasn't special.
I think they need more interior offensive line than exterior offensive line. But I think it's something that they could probably, like Rick said, it is a deeper offensive line draft. There's a lot of tackles out there, and I think there's a lot of guys that you can probably convert or have play versatile. But their defensive line was just as poor last year, and they did just lose J.J. Watt. So it's not like that they're, going to be lighting the world on fire on either side. So you have to go with the best player available in my mind. And let's see, who's even their starting defensive ends right now?
And the selection.
They have Majai Sanders and Richard and Cameron Thomas. So I think I'm gonna go edge rusher, and I think I'm gonna go with a guy who had a lot of production out of LSU, BJ Ojulari. Yeah. I think it's a true pass rusher that they can tie up with their original first round pick and really light something on that defense. Really get after that quarterback and maybe make up for not having a guy like Buda Baker going forward.
Yeah, for certain. BJ Ojulari, I do like that selection. I think he's supremely talented again. I think a team that's going to get him here in the early portions definitely was someone I was looking at with my range of picks here coming up. So I do like the BJ Ojulari selection. You have the Colts and the Rams here next. Rick, do you have a comment about that? You're doing the thinking man pose here.
Nothing really for me. I mean, BJ Ojulari's a good talent. He's a little bit on the undersized side, so he's got to get, I think, a little bit more beefed up there. I think he's only 250, but I mean, hopefully he's better than his brother.
I mean, his brother's not too bad of a player. So.
Yeah, he's played well. Played well for the Giants.
All right, Colts at 35 here.
All right. Let's see. Now the Colts, they addressed the quarterback situation, but I think they're gonna try and protect him now. They need a receiver to help him out, but I think they focused on the offensive line. Like I said, football is built through the lines. And to me, the best player left at tackle would be DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State. 6'8", 374 pounds. This is a young kid who is just going to be like an anchor on the side of the line. I think he's really not going to give up a lot. He's going to be like a stalwart for years to come. So look for them to pair him with their new young quarterback.
Nice. I do like that. Definitely. The Colts' underrated need for them actually is honestly offensive line. And especially left tackle. It just has not been the same since Costanzo. So maybe DeJuan Jones, maybe you give him a grace period year to maybe try him at right tackle, or maybe you just put him straight up at left tackle right away. But certainly a selection I don't think Colts fans would be mad at. If Colts fans are leaving this draft somehow with Bryce Young and DeJuan Jones, or let's say somehow CJ Stroud and DeJuan Jones, I think they'd be pretty happy on that side of things. Speaking of trying to be happy here, and they'll just take any talent they can at this point, the Los Angeles Rams, they said F them picks, and the picks said, well, F you back. Bad year for the Rams last season. They did get the Super Bowl at the end of the day, so they got something. But obviously it was a down year, worst season for a Super Bowl champion probably ever, at least in the modern era. So we'll see what the Rams could do here. Definitely some holes to fill. Justin, who could the Rams take? You could argue Jalen Ramsey now is gone. Is the secondary in a good spot? But they needed offensive line help last season. You saw they pair someone to Aaron Donald. An interesting – the Rams are certainly in an interesting position here, to say the very least. They need some talent. There's some talent there. Who do they go with?
I feel like a broken record here. What did I just say the last two picks?
I don't know. You took a defense player to
the lines. Football is built through the lines. You have to take linemen, and I think that they are in a serious rebuilding and rebuild fast situation. I'm going to go with Maisie Smith out of Michigan. I think he's a big guy. He would be excellent to sit next to Aaron Donald and let them clog up the middle. He'll be like a true nose tackle while Aaron Donald gets after the quarterback. I'm going to pick Maisie Smith. I think he's going to be an excellent line fit there.
I don't blame him at all. I think he's a pretty good player overall. I know it's kind of short and sweet, but I think like his pick that makes sense. I think if you're the Rams, I also would consider offensive line, but I don't blame the selection there at all. Like I think you go with what makes sense there. All right, moving on. The Seattle Seahawks, once again, myself, just a refresher for the people in our 3-round mock here. We're early in the second round. The Seattle Seahawks, Tyree Wilson and Hendon Hooker were taken in the first round by yours truly. So what am I going to go with here is the question. I will say this. I think if you are Seattle, this might be considered, again, probably a reach, but Seattle's had no problem reaching in drafts past. I think this is where you need to start looking at the interior, the offensive line, and you need to look at the center. Guard and center are legitimate needs. Just because I didn't pick them in the first round doesn't mean anything. I think for me, Luke Weipler, I personally think if Avila was a true center, I think he's a guard/center. I think he'd be the best center in the draft class. But if not him, I think Luke Weipler would be the next guy. I'm going with him for them at 37. I'm going to keep that short and sweet personally. Keep it pretty simple. Christian Gonzalez was the pick I made for the Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, with their pick earlier on. And I still think defense is relatively in need here. You know, I think we're starting to enter a territory where you can look to the linebacking class of this team, or the linebacking core of this draft of like, hey, who who do I feel comfortable with using a draft pick on with the linebackers? Because again, this isn't necessarily a supremely strong line, but I think relatively speaking, you could consider it. But it's not where I'm going. This guy has fallen to the second round. I'm not going to let him fall anymore. I think the Raiders are decent on the interior, but I think they need more talent there. So give me Brian Breesy as my guy going to the Las Vegas Raiders. I know they've been spurred with picking a Clemson defensive lineman before, but I don't think it'll happen this time. I think Brian Breesy makes sense. I think it's a need. I think easily the best player available based off of where he should have gone according to the mock. So I would send him there personally. Again, I think pretty talented to say the very least. Just because he fell doesn't mean we don't think he's talented. It's a combination of team needs that have gone on so far, where he's fallen, etc. Certainly could have gone beforehand, but the Raiders, I think they'd be pretty happy if they got him early in the second round.
I mean, what do we always say? Somebody in these drafts has to fall, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, there's one guy that's going to fall out of the first round for reasons that are untoward. Andy Reid has an off day and hits the wrong button, and Tanner McKee's pick instead of, somebody else. So,
Okay.
Tanner McKee, good sandwich.
All right.
I'll pull the curtain back. I'll be honest with you too. Jurgen, you screwed me over because Hooker would have been my pick at 31,
right?
Just because I thought project wise, and then I would have picked McKee at 45 to Green Bay and really try to stir up nonsense with the Packers. Jordan Love or Tanner McKee.
I know we're called the sports agents of chaos, but that's a lot of chaos right there. All right.
Yeah, I enjoy myself. I enjoy having fun.
The whole draft board into chaos.
Yeah, right. All right, wide receiver. Let's do it. I think it's pretty obvious. Kids had some great success in North Carolina. It's a deep shot. I think. See, here's the thing. I don't think the Panthers are a lack of talent that some people are trying to say at the skill position group. I like Laviska Shenault. I hope he's finally be able to get used in Carolina this season under Frank Reich. I think Adam Thielen is a nice veteran backup. Veteran pickup. Why did I say backup?
I heard pack up. I was like, oh, okay.
It was back or pack. I don't know. People will decide. But ultimately, they do need a little bit more skill position here. I think if somehow one of the tight ends had fallen, I would have, I think, strongly considered tight end. But again, I think this is a tight end class where you can, Sam Laporta is very tempting there. But I think ultimately speaking, wide receiver would be the way to go. And this is a guy who's had some success in his career, in his collegiate career. Give me Josh Downs out of UNC. I think it'll be a good fit there in Carolina for what they need, for what they just need to add to that team. They need that extra pop in terms of guys that they're going to end up using. And I know Rick has his thoughts about Josh Downs, how he's very similar to Zay Flowers. Let me run with a guy who's a two-time first-team All-ACC in his collegiate career, who had some success. A guy left in Sam Howell. Now, thankfully, he ended up getting a pretty good player in Drake May, taking the spot. Back-to-back 1,000-plus yard seasons, 19 touchdowns over the last two seasons for himself over there. And, hey, if anything, could be a good slot middle-of-the-field guy as well. So Josh Downs, I think, is a worthy selection here with the second-round pick. And then let me complete all this. Let's go with the New Orleans Saints. I made a selection for the Saints earlier on for the people that are probably just joining, and I went with Steve Avila out of TCU. I went with the interior there. This time I will be looking at the defensive side of the ball more so than anything. And I know people are looking at our draft board and saying, guys, how has this certain player fallen? He should probably be taken higher, and we get it. Nolan Smith is certainly entertaining at this point, but I think you need to go with a little bit more of a proven product here. Felix Anduke-Uzomah will be my selection for the Saints. Again, got to add to that defensive line. And I think Uzomah is he's a good player. I think he's a talented player overall wise. I don't think you can go wrong with a guy who had a solid production at the college level. Played for a pretty good team, I think, relatively speaking, Kansas State. I know they're not a world beater, but had production. Let me go with Uzomah.
So the one thing that Anudike-Uzomah has over Nolan Smith is that Anudike-Uzomah can get underneath the tackles a lot better than Nolan Smith can. And Nolan Smith also was a little undersized too. There was not been a starting defensive edge last year in the NFL that was under 240 pounds. Nolan Smith clocks in at 238.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of talent. It's just a question of build yourself up a little bit more.
Yeah. And nearly 20 sacks over the last two seasons for Uzomah. And by the way, two-time Big 12 Defensive Lineman of the Year and the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year from this past season. I don't think that's a bad selection at all. All right. That completes my run of picks here. We're about to get into another mini Justin run here with a Titans pick once again, poor soul, and then back-to-back Jets picks who Will it belong to the Jets come the actual draft? Who knows, considering there's still an Aaron Rodgers trade looming. But for now, Justin, you're on the clock.
All right. Well, I am going to pick who is for the Titans. I'm going to pick a lineman who was projected to go in the first round. Obviously, still on the board, still high up there. That would be Anton Harrison. Not the most athletic guy out there, but I think he's a solid left tackle. He started, I think, towards the beginning of his freshman year, and for the last 2 years, I think he let up under 10 pressures in 450 snaps last year, which is excellent, especially for a top team like Oklahoma. So I think he's a great fit there. It addresses the other need that they had on offense. And again, this is all about making Derrick Henry go. And this is a pick that would help them out with that. For the Jets, I think, again, they sit down with an embarrassment of riches, and now they could really address some of the needs I think that they had as a team. And it's more than just tackle. I think that they really do need an edge rusher, and a guy like Nolan Smith just fell into their lap. I don't necessarily think they make both of these picks, but if they have one and this guy's there, I wouldn't be surprised if they do take him. So pencil me in for Nolan Smith. And the next guy I'm going to take for the Jets, again, I don't necessarily know if they're going to make this pick, but one of the highest rated linebackers in this class, Jack Campbell out of Iowa. He's a guy that, again, has started the last 2 years for Iowa. Excellent defense. He's going to be an excellent guy in the middle of the field. He can pretty much do anything you ask him to do. It's exactly what the Jets need going forward for the middle of their defense. Put me in for Jack Campbell.
I'm thinking some choice words for you, Justin.
Yeah, what's that?
That's my guy. How dare you?
What else?
How dare you take my
guy?
What?
He's on what should still be your team because we don't give up here. Even though we should because we're Jets fans, but we don't. That's
look. I've loved Jack Campbell and the way he's played for years. I think that he's an excellent player in that mindset and that mold. I think it's great. I really do. I think that he would fit phenomenally in New York. I think he'd be an excellent talent there. Let me move ahead because I've got 2 picks now coming up, and I'm going to start with the Falcons at 44. And I've thought about this one mostly because I'm trying to think about, guys that I like and guys that I think can be really special for the Falcons. And it says quarterback, wide receiver, and edge are needs. And while I agree with that, if you're going to take a linebacker, I think you also have to consider the fact that there's a guy on the board who is a tackling machine, and somebody who I think can really be a stronger asset to the defensive side. And it's not a guy that I had initially expected to take here, but I think that he's excellent, and that would be Tuli Tuipulotu, the edge from USC, going here at 44. I think that he's a guy who kind of fits that same sort of like Drake Jackson mold that we had from last year, where he can really be an excellent second-round pick and a second-day pick for them. And I kind of like it because I know the Falcons, they do have some good edge. I know they have Grady Jarrett. They just got Calais Campbell, but those guys are on the, Calais Campbell's 38 now, right? And Grady Jarrett is almost in his age 30 season. So let's get some youth and get some Samoan aggression in there. As I put on my best Paul Heyman impersonation there. Tui Pelotu goes there. I had Skoronski going to them, so it's both sides of the ball. You get an O lineman and a D lineman. The Packers here at 45. So I think the Packers, if you're scared about the fact that you took D-line last year with Devontae Wyatt in the first round and they kind of burned you, I think this is where you try and hit a home run in the second round like they did last year in the wide receiver game. I think, why not add more weapons and why not get younger and want to try and surround Jordan Love with guys who can catch the ball? And this, as we've talked about, maybe reach, but shockingly, I'm going to reach for it. Why not? Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee to Green Bay at number 45. if you want to talk about Hendon Hooker and how well he played last year, you've got to also include Jalen Hyatt in that conversation because he exploded onto the scene. Almost 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns. He had 4 touchdown catches in the previous 2 years up until this year when he absolutely exploded into the SEC scene. I think this is a guy that if you pair him with Christian Watson and Michael Mayer, who they also had there, do the Packers have other needs? Sure. You could say they need somebody on the defensive side of the ball, but maybe you hope that Devontae Wyatt gets better in year 2. And now that you have more weapons, you've got Romeo Dobbs, you've got Samori Toure. You add Hyatt into that mix too, a premium ball catcher. And I think you give Jordan Love a lot of opportunity here to find a guy in green and gold and not in some other jersey color. So I think Jalen Hyatt is a good pick here at 45 for the Packers.
I don't blame it. I like the selection. I'm with you. When you talk about a quarterback success in college, you need to consider what the wide receivers were, and certainly the wide receiver at Tennessee, especially Jalen Hyatt, like he was the guy. He was the guy on that squad for sure.
Does that make up for Tanner McKee, Justin?
No,
I'm kidding.
I'll answer that for him.
I'm kidding.
Not to pick for the Chiefs again. Let's see what you do in the next round.
Oh, you mean 63 in the middle of my run of 5? No, 6, no problem. I'll let you know.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh Lord, that is gonna be. Do we need to make it where if Rick loses the pick challenge again next season, he has to get a Tanner McKee jersey? Like I think
leaning that way. No, we'll see who is actually drafted in the real NFL because that's where I came from. Nobody picked Cole Strange in the mock, and then all of a sudden someone picked Cole Strange in the real draft, and everyone was like, "Damn, someone picked Cole Strange."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That was a big one.
So if they pick Tanner McKee in the first round, I'll end up buying a Tanner McKee jersey, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, goodness gracious, boys. All right. Could go in a couple different directions here with the Patriots once again on the clock. Tackle is certainly a need, to say the very least, and it is certainly something to look at. Also, it mentions edge. I think defense just in general could use just an infusion of young talent overall if you are the New England Patriots. I think for the Pats, this is a squad that you're very much a veteran-laden team once again, and I think you need to add the right kind of young talent here in terms of youth, energy, can fulfill a need for you, could play a role, and I'm going to go with a guy who, again, maybe I'm overdrafting with the selection. I don't know necessarily speaking off the top of my head, but I'm going to personally go with a player that he wasn't a tackling machine necessarily speaking in his last year of college, but he was solid. He got 4 sacks. He forced 3 fumbles. He even caught an interception, kind of a little bit of a do-it-all. Dion Henley out of Washington State will be my selection for the Patriots there. Definitely a guy I actually would have also considered with the Commanders selection there, because I think those are 2 players those are 2 teams that could use a linebacker like that. Henley, again, not necessarily a tackling machine, just in terms of solo tackles. In solo tackles, he only had 54. If you go with total tackles, he had 106 overall, which is good. But again, 4 sacks, a couple forced fumbles, so he got a little bit in there. He actually, the year before, he had 1 interception last year, but the year before when he was on Nevada, 4 interceptions. So some interception potential there from the young linebacker out of Washington State. Definitely used the 5th year to his advantage in regards to, I'm assuming it was probably his COVID year that he used. So Henley does that. And then with the 47th pick, so with Washington, a little bit of a flashback into the draft with my selection, because I'm not going to lie, I partially forgot what the heck I did with this team earlier, but I went Broderick Jones on the offensive line earlier for them. So I think I need to go with defense here. And again, I spoke about with this team, I think the defensive line is set. Maybe would you consider a pass rusher if you trade Montez Sweat? Very much so. I don't think that is necessarily out of the realm of possibility, but they need to go with corner, I think, or linebacker. And again, certainly interesting. I know Cam Smith is on the board, but again, I'm seeing more people high on this guy. I'm going to go, again, a little bit of a reach potentially, but I'm going to go with Tyreek Stevenson out of Miami for the Washington Commanders. I think he's physical. I think he loves using his hands, getting off the line of scrimmage. I think he's going to be able to cover guys relatively well. I think, is he a scheme fit for Ron Rivera? I think so. I think Ron Rivera wants a guy in there that has the potential to be a man coverage corner. I think Tyreek Stevenson could be that guy. So I'm going with my back-to-back picks, going with Henley for the Pats, and I'm going with Stevenson for the Communists. So the Red Wave continues to add more onto itself.
I almost want to ask, but I'm not 100% certain. Who was the last defensive back from the University of Miami that the Commanders took? I think the answer is Sean Taylor.
It might be.
And that was a guy who was incredibly talented when he played. So the fact that Stevenson's rising up the boards is interesting.
The curse has been lifted.
Yes, it has.
Do you think, because they're getting new ownership finally, do you think they're going to do it this season or maybe wait a year before they try to honor Sean Taylor again and actually do it correctly this time?
I think you do it this year because I think you send a statement and a message. I think that, especially with Magic Johnson as a part owner, I think you do it this year because I think if anybody knows the cognizance of not having a lot of time or not, missing out on a lot of opportunities, it's Magic Johnson.
Right.
So I think that he has a very good awareness of the community around the game. So I think that this is the year you do it. And right. I would welcome it wholeheartedly. I would go to Washington for that ceremony.
I was considering it because Sean Taylor was in the 2004 draft class.
Yep.
So would you maybe wait after 2024 into the 2024 season, the 20-year anniversary of when you drafted him and brought him onto the team?
I almost think that that's a good opportunity to do it too, but I think that this is the right time because you've got this cleansing with the Snyders gone and with Josh Harris and Magic there, brand new ownership, make a big statement in your first year, endear yourself to the community. Like you'd lost all this love with the Commanders name and the Redskins name being gone. So try and win it back. I think this would be a good opportunity to try and win it back from the get-go.
Fair. Very fair. Yeah. All right. Justin, apologize for delaying you a little bit. 3 picks in a row here for you. You got the Lions, the Steelers, and the Buccaneers. The draft board belongs to you, my man.
Sure. All right. So with the Lions pick, I think that there's a glaring hole that happened that they happened to lose last year, in their offense, and that is going to come into the form of double-digit touchdown numbers that they had at the running back position. I'm going to replace that with Jahmyr Gibbs. I think that he's an excellent second kind of complement back. He'll do excellent work with DeAndre Smith. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's an electric player. I don't know if he's going to get a ton of early down snaps or first team reps, but he's an excellent second piece that they can add to that offense to keep them relevant in the red zone. And then it's funny because it's kind of like switched. Last time it was Steelers, Lions. Now it's going to be Lions, Steelers in the second round. And I'm gonna keep hammering away at that secondary. I'm gonna take Cam Smith out of South Carolina. Like I said, they gave up a ton of touchdowns last year. It's weird because they also were among the best teams in interceptions. So I think this is only the rich getting richer in terms of that, but they really need help in their secondary, and I'm going to go with Cam Smith there. For the Buccaneers, so much needs to be done. Here's where I would have taken Tanner McKee, Rick. I would have reached out for him because I do think they need a project quarterback. It's worth a stab here, but now I'm not sure that there's anyone there that would fill that need. So instead, I think I'm going to go with Joe Tippmann out of Wisconsin. I know that they do have some center play there, but they really need offensive linemen. It doesn't hurt to have some depth. And Tippmann is a guy that has played well out of Wisconsin. I believe he started the last 2 years and has only given up 1 sack. So Tippmann is my pick for the Bucs.
Yeah, Tippmann is a tight end in a center's body. I mean, he's 6'6", 313, and he just moves incredibly well for a guy who's on the offensive line here. So, you know what? Even if you don't have a quarterback in this room because they have Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask, it does help that you have a center who can move with lightning speed like that. So, you know, it can help them. I think that's a good selection for the Buccaneers there.
Agreed. Tippmann was great. Like, I'm with you, Justin. I said you were picking 19 when you ended up taking Joey Porter Jr. for them, but I don't. Tampa's one of the teams in the first round that I personally don't have a feel for what they're gonna do because, like you said, they have so many needs. But I'm with you. I think Tippmann would be a good selection here for them overall. Speaking, they need they lost a lot of offensive line last year due to injuries too. Tippmann would be a nice youth movement for them.
They need cornerstone players. They need young players that are going to stay there, play a lot of snaps, and do the dirty things, be real franchise cornerstones, and, you know, give them a place to build upon. They have they have a lot of pieces that I would consider finishing pieces. Like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, both great teams, great players. Those are players I think that can win you a championship, but those are not players that are going to keep you in contention if you have nothing else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those are players that I would think maybe end up getting traded at some point towards the middle of the year, or if not the end of the year, and going into next season if things don't work out in Tampa Bay.
Nice. No, I don't blame you at all in any way. Tampa, I think, again, I want to say I said this when we were talking about them, was it 2-3 weeks ago? Tampa to me is a team that could very much be a seller come the trade deadline, because they're going to be entering a new phase with the team. There's a lot of veteran pieces that people will be, even Devin White, who just recently, like a couple days ago, wanted to get traded. Like, Tampa could be doing a lot of selling off here. All right, back-to-back selections for moi. I got the Dolphins and the Seahawks here. Dolphins, I might surprise people with the player I'm going with, but it's not the position that should be a shock. It's a need here. They need a tight end. They lost Gesicki. They traded a tight end, was probably the third or fourth stringer in that deal for Jalen Ramsey. So I'm going to go with tight end, but I'm not going to go with Sam Laporta, even though he is the top available tight end. I'm actually going to go with Luke Musgrave because, again, I think part of the reason why Gesicki ultimately didn't work out was because I think Shanahan wants more of a guy that can run block. And you want to talk about a guy who is very good footwork in terms of aiding on an offensive line, aiding with the offensive line to be that sixth blocker. Luke Musgrave is a guy very good with his inside hand when it comes to helping out in the run blocking. I think that's a big thing with the injuries to Tua. If the running game is going to be a key here to help support him and try to mitigate what could happen to him, you need a tight end out there that could be that sixth offensive lineman on a couple plays. That's who Luke Musgrave would be for this offense. Again, very good a pretty good run blocker at Oregon State. And I think Sam Laporta may be more talented, yes, but I think Shanahan would go, or no, not Shanahan, excuse me, Shanahan type offense, but for McDaniel, that's who they would go with. So I got Musgrave going here for the Dolphins at 51. So that's my selection there. And with the Seattle Seahawks, God, Seattle has so many picks. So I've gone center with them. I've gone quarterback with them. I've gone defense with them in terms of defensive line. I'm definitely looking to go a little bit more defense here, or even offense. Actually, no rest for the weary. I think they could always use a little bit more talent to help out on the offensive line of things. Because again, whether it be Geno Smith or whether it be the future of the franchise that I drafted in the first round in Hendon Hooker, you could certainly consider things here. It's tough for me. I do want to go corner because, again, I've sung the praises of this corner class. I think there is certainly some talent here. And I do like the idea of Julius Brents here to them. Certainly interesting. But I'm going to go with maybe a little bit of an out there pick. But, hey, it's not the first time that Seattle Seahawks are known for going out there. I'm going to actually go with Antonio Johnson, the safety out of Texas A&M. Because, yes, I know they're relatively set with safety in Jamal Adams and Diggs. Let's be real here, though. Jamal Adams has very much underperformed in his Seattle Seahawks tenure, and he's kind of been more of a pass rusher than anything. I think with Antonio Johnson, you give an opportunity here for a young safety to learn in that secondary. You give him a chance to learn with Quandre Diggs there, who's a veteran of the game, who's very good. I think Antonio Johnson is just a nice, even medium of fit for maybe more of a future need after this season. But I think the players he's going to learn under, I think this would be a great thing. And again, Seattle is known for maybe overdrafting players. Maybe Antonio Johnson is more of a late second round guy, perhaps. But I think this is a team that has shown they're willing to take a guy, maybe 5-10 selections up where he should have been. I'm going with Antonio Johnson here for the Seahawks.
I like that. I mean, I think he and Jimmy Robinson from Florida State are two excellent safeties that you could have picked in that mold there. So I think either one of them would have worked. I have the Bears now at 53, and Devin Witherspoon went off the board, the corner, so I'm torn. Last year we talked about it, when you fall in love with a guy versus, a guy that fits need. Well, both positions are needs. So the question is, do I go with the tackle, knowing that the only real tackle is Alex Leatherwood, who got released after his rookie season, or a center, knowing that the only center they have was who was drafted last year in the 6th round. I tend to think that tackle is more of a need because I think you can get Doug Kramer to build himself up a little bit more. And so for me, I'm going to head north of the border with this pick and take Matthew Bergeron, the tackle out of Syracuse. I think this guy plays with a great balance. He's 6'5", and he can play both sides of the line at tackle. I think that's what you need for Justin Fields here. I know Peter Skoronski would have been a great pick for them, but I think this pick too is bonus because this is the pick for the Roquan Smith trade for Baltimore. So this is a bonus selection the Bears have. So you can go a little bit more of a, less of a need. But I think Bergeron's a guy that can slot in day one and be a really good starting tackle, either left side or right side for the Bears.
I'm good with it. I like it. I actually like Matthew Bergeron a lot. I'm looking at him as a second round, third round guy, like who immense value to say the very least of what they could get there. So I like that selection a lot, Rick.
Yeah.
I do. All right. I got the San Diego Superchargers. No, I got the Los Angeles Chargers, unfortunately. They have to change themselves from San Diego. I feel you, San Diego. I feel you. All right. Interesting selection here. Could go either way in terms of what the needs are. I don't want to rule out wide receiver necessarily, but I think with the top two guys that they have, I think if you're LA, there's still some good receivers here on the board that I think you can afford waiting till the third round for. I think you want to try to get to one of these two defensive sides of the ball here more so. So I'm going to go with a guy who I considered with an earlier selection, and I'm going to go with Julius Brents here for the team out of Kansas State. Ultimately speaking, I think with the Chargers, a big thing for them in the last couple of years has been health. And they've had some struggles with health. I think, especially the secondary. So you get Julius Brents there to be a guy. I don't think it's necessarily expectation he needs to play right away, but he's still a good enough player where I think he could contribute relatively early. Maybe they find a way to get him in a couple of packages on that team. The defense, there was a lot of hype into the defense last season for the Chargers, and they kind of failed in a couple of cases, especially in that second half against the Jaguars. So Julius Brents, I don't think is necessarily a bad option for them to go with the second round here. So he's off the board now. And going up next, we finally have a little bit of parity in terms of who's going next. It's Justin, Rick, then myself. So Justin.
Yay.
Yes. The next 6 picks, actually. So there we go. Before Rick takes the second round all for himself like the greedy human being he is. So,
I am, aren't I?
So before he takes it from us, Justin, go with your Lions pick here.
All right. I'm going to go with what I think is one of their needs. They traded away T.J. Hawkinson last year. They need a tight end. And I think that they're going to be a more run-heavy team this year. They were pretty run-heavy last year. They like to throw the ball over to the top, but Equanimus St. Brown and Jamison Williams had their injuries concerns. I don't think that they're a pass-first team. So I'm going to go with a more run-steady tight end, and that is Darnell Washington out of Georgia. At 6'6" and 264, I think he's going to be an excellent fit there. He's an excellent run blocker. I expect him to do good things there.
Yeah, I like Darnell Washington a lot. I think that he's got a great catch radius as well, and I think that's huge for that team. And then you know what? If that's what happens for the Lions, you add a good running back and a good tight end in the second round. I think it's a big positive for them. Jacksonville at 56. This is not a need that they list. PFF doesn't, but it is a need because Evan Ingram's on the franchise tag because of his great year last year. And so you got to think that there's a case to be made where he can maybe get a little bit iffy. You have to make sure that last year wasn't a fluke. So then you have to go with, I think they're going with the tight end here, but I think there are two guys that I'm torn between. I don't think they're going Sam Laporta because I think that he's more of a wide receiver type of tight end. Like he's 6'3", whereas Tucker Kraft and Luke Schoonmaker are 6'5". And I like both of them a little bit more than I do Laporta here. It's just a question for me of which one I like more than the other. And I'm going to go with the Jackrabbit here. I'm going to say Tucker Kraft to the Jaguars at, 56. So Tucker Kraft is a bigger body specimen who can really run good routes. But I think that especially with this Jaguars team that has a strong running game, he can be a good blocker as well. And so I think that if Evan Ingram proves that that last year was a bit of a fluke, or even if he's an okay guy, you have a 2 tight end set, you can at least work with in that mindset to get Kraft in there too. So I think that it's the best selection in that regard for them.
Nice. I don't blame it. First off, tight end run here. Let's go, boys. I like it. But in all seriousness, yeah, I think I like the value of the multi-tight end set here, and I'm certainly with you, Rick, in regards to the teams that we've all selected for these tight ends. Myself with the Dolphins, you with the Jaguars, and Justin with the Lions. They're all teams that The tight end, it's nice if the tight end can receive, but I think there's certainly value in terms of the tight end that could be a really strong blocker as well. And I think that's what all three of the tight ends we selected here are all able to do. So, Giants at 57 for myself. Certainly interesting here, to say the very least, what I could go with. Wide receiver, we've already handled that. Linebacker is certainly an option here if you are the Giants. And if there is one thing they could use a bit of a youth movement on, linebacker is an option. They did make a couple of signings in the offseason in terms of just free agency pickups or veteran pickups. They got Bobby Okereke from the Indianapolis Colts, and they got Gerard Davis on the team as well. So it's very iffy. It's tough because I also want to consider offensive line a little bit, because just cleaning up that a little bit more I think would be nice. But kind of leaning towards the defensive side of the ball here when it comes to the Giants selections. So I am going to go with the best linebacker on the board here remaining, at least for now, Drew Sanders out of Arkansas. I know it's always tricky when you go with need, but I think Sanders is – I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to go with need at times. I know there's always a whole best player available versus need debate, but I think Sanders is certainly a player that I think you should be willing to take, especially at this stage in the draft, in what he is able to do for you. And he had a pretty good season with the Razorbacks last season. 9.5 sacks is wild. And 3 forced fumbles as well. So he's a guy that they'll definitely be able to dial up the pressure. I think dialing up pressure with the front seven is a big thing that they'll want to continue to do next season. And I think Dayball's defense could definitely use a guy like a Drew Sanders there. So moving on from me, the Dallas Cowboys are next. And that selection, of course, belongs to Justin. So, Justin, this is your last pick of this round, and my last pick of this round is coming up after you before Rick, just completely takes the board. So let's make this count.
All right. I'm going to take a little bit of a risk here for the Cowboys. I'm going to take a guy who took a step back last year, actually, and Siaki Ika, I believe his name is pronounced, the nose tackle out of Baylor. Big kid, really, really strong. He's played excellent for Baylor, but he did take a step back slightly last year in productions. And he went from 6 sacks the year before to 0 this year. Might be a little bit of a project, but it fills a need. He's a Texas boy, which they love, and well, at least in Baylor. And I think that he could be a really good fit there. It's a matter of, can they get the best production out of him? But I think it's worth the risk at this point in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if there's a guy that you want, somehow you got to make it work. The questions for Siaki Ika are the same as Jalen Carter, because he comes in, it could be 335, he could be 350. So his weight is the big question mark there. Now, that's why he fell off a little bit last year. But when he's right, he's got a great motor, and he could be a steal in the second round.
Yeah, I'm with you. First off, I want to give a shout out to Justin here for, helping these kids, because, Bijan Robinson and now Siaki Ika, they don't have to leave the state. They just have to move over. Look at Justin looking out for these guys.
There's no income tax in Texas either, so it works out.
Look at that.
They can make all their money.
Good guy, Justin.
Yeah,
he's okay. Do what I can. Dallas those boys from Texas.
That's fair.
All right. Let's keep it moving. Buffalo Bills here. Obviously, I think they could certainly use a little bit more talent on the back end of things here. I think certainly interesting running back. I will be going running back here. It's just a matter of I know these guys are ranked the way they are, but I think there's a lot of talent when it comes to the running backs that are on the board right now. And again, maybe you could argue that. Well, I don't think it's up for argument. This next pick is definitely going to be a reach, to say the very least. But I think that for the Buffalo Bills, you need a guy who could just add pop to the team. You need a guy who could add talent. And if you're going to try to do that, I'm going to try to go with a guy who won the Offensive Player of the Year for his conference, had 19 touchdowns on the ground, and actually over the last 2 seasons, 32 touchdowns on the ground alone total. Not too much of a receiving running back, which I don't like. Maybe they could try to work on that in Buffalo, but I'm going to take a risk on just the running game in and of itself. Give me Dwayne McBride out of UAB for the Buffalo Bills. Again, Conference USA Player of the Year. The amazing touchdown work that he's put for them is massive. The yards per carry is a big thing. Obviously, the yards per carry isn't going to necessarily translate, but I like the idea of a guy who could just run through people. And I think Dwayne McBride has the ability to do that. 5'11", 215 pounds. I don't think he's as good as Charbonnet, in terms of that, but I think he could be that next guy that, again, I mean, it was between Forbes and a running back with the first Buffalo Bills pick. Jesus, I said pills there. Buffalo Bills pick that I had, and now I'm going with the running back here, and I think McBride would be a nice addition there to the running back room over in Buffalo. All right, Rick has, we're going to count those selections here real quick. He has the next 6 in a row. So, Justin, we basically have a break on the pod here. Who will be the Tanner McKee of this draft selection stretch?
Hey,
we'll see.
Hey,
so Rick, you are on the clock for a while now, and it starts with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay, so I want to kind of do something a little similar to what Justin was saying, and I want to give some guys a little bit more pub than I think they might not get, and there might be some reaches here in this 6, but what do you expect from me other than that? I went running back for Cincinnati with Zach Charbonnet, and I thought that was a pretty decent selection. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to go with a corner in this pick for the Bengals here, but I'm going to go with a guy who is a little bit more of a taller corner. Because for whatever reason, I just like guys that are a little taller than maybe because I'm a tall guy too. Maybe that's what I like too. He's not ranked that highly on the PFF board, but this is a guy who is built like a linebacker at 6'3", 206, loves playing press coverage corner, and can really be a bully on the outer edge. So I'm going to go with Corey Trice out of Purdue at number 60. See, there's other talented corners that are above him, but they're all like shorter guys. And if there's one thing that I know about NFL, and it's not much, as you clearly saw from my 31st pick this year, it's not much. But one thing that I do know is that quarterbacks love going over the top to these wide receivers. So if you can get a guy who can kind of match up well against the 6'1", 6'2" wide receiver, it might stop things. And let's be honest here, the Bengals, they needed a lot of help in the secondary last year. And, Eli Apple wasn't the answer. So I think that this is a good fit in that mold set. 61 to the Bears. Now, when I talked about the Bears, the argument that I had for this one is that can you justify not taking a skill position player right now? Can you say to the Bears fans, look, I know you guys want to get another wide receiver in there, but you have Claypool, you have DJ Moore, we've got good positions and all that sort of mindset. One thing you cannot really say for the Bears, I think, is that their running game is totally set. I don't really think that is. I mean, Montgomery was hurt a lot last year. And right now, Deontay Foreman is one of their main guys along with Khalil Homer. So I want to get in the guy who's going to be a bell cow back. I want to get in the guy who's going to be a bruiser. I want to get into the next Walter Payton if I can. And I'm going to try and find him in the second round for the Bears. And that'll be Tank Bigsby out of Auburn will be my pick. I love Kendre Miller, don't get me wrong, but I think that if you're talking about a guy who, can really just possess that size and that speed and can really be a between the tackles type of runner, I think that Tank Bigsby is your guy to do that. I could have gone with a guy who I will go with at 64, but in this mindset, I think Tank Bigsby is the answer here. Philadelphia at 62. Now, I have gone with defensive interior and wide receiver in this draft for these guys. So I want to go with something a little bit different. And this is going to hurt in some ways because I wanted to save this guy for a little bit later on. But I almost think that taking him now can really be interesting for the Eagles. That's Jordan Battle, the safety out of Alabama, going here at 62. It's a need for them. Jordan Battle's not a special athlete, but he's 6'1", 209. He's a very good box 2 wide safety. And look, the Eagles lost CJ GJ, so they need a little more help in that secondary room. So I think that having him there is going to be a significant difference maker. The pick you've all been waiting for now at 63, the Kansas City Chiefs, to see what they can do with all of that. Now, yes, the Chiefs lost a good amount of spots in a good amount of positions here. And I think that that's something that can't be understated. What they need really boils down to what you think you're going to get out of the guys that they've added. They added Jawan Taylor, so you might think, well, their offensive line's okay. And you could be right about that. They added Richie James to John Ross. You think their wide receiver's okay. And you could be right about that too. I think one of the needs, Justin mentioned it, they got rid of, Frank Clark is gone. So they need an edge. They need somebody that's going to be an excellent player on that edge spot. And I could go with Adetomiwa Adebayor, who at 282 pounds ran a 4.49 second 40-yard dash. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go with that edge player. I'm going to go with a guy who I truly think can really bring in a different mindset here. And I want to go with a guy who's going to be a star or has the makings of being a star. I want Andre Carter II from Army for the Chiefs. He is a 6'7" edge who, a lot of the things that you're going to say are like, he's lost a lot of his strength because he had a year off where he was training for the Army. The guy was training for the Army. And what that means is that he knows discipline and he knows how to play within the rules and within the tackles. I think if you're Andre Carter, this is a good spot for you to fit. I know he could be a third-round guy, but I think that his skill set is just too good to pass up here. So I think Kansas City will take him and be happy about that. So that will conclude our second round. Now on to the third round. And the Bears are on the clock. And so I went corner, I went tackle, I went running back. I think we need to short that defensive line a little bit as well for the Bears. I mean, I love Dominique Robinson, don't get me wrong, but let's add somebody else who can be a bit of a stronger player as well. And so I'm looking at, on the interior, I'm looking at Keanu Benton from Wisconsin going at 64 to the Bears. I think that Benton has the right mindset. He's a violent player when it comes to the use of his hands. And I think that is something that can really just pick apart an offensive line. He's a guy that will play between the A gap and the B gap all the time because he's able to do both those things. And so I think that versatility will lend him really well for this team. And I think that it's again, I think that you could also make an argument for taking John Michael Schmitz here, the center, because again, the Bears don't have a strong center, but just train Doug Kramer. You drafted him last year for a reason. Train him to become a better center for you in that regard. And that leads me to the Texans with this pick, my last pick of this grouping here. And I, once again, am going to give a shout out to a guy who might not have gotten your pick, but you know what? Justin has inspired me to do something here. I'm going to keep a Texas boy in Texas. And so the Texans at 65 will take Rashee Rice, the wide receiver from SMU, and keep him in Texas as well. Rice exploded. You want to talk about Jalen Hyatt exploding? Rice went from under 700 yards in 2021 to 1,400 yards receiving in 2022. Now, a lot of that had to do with Tanner Mordecai, who that SMU running gun offense was incredible. But I think that if you add Rashee Rice to this group, this wide receiver room, he's going to make a difference. And he could be a sneaky guy to be your number one wide receiver on opening day. I think that he's an excellent player. He's got great route skills, excellent hands, very talented player. I think that he's a guy that could potentially be a steal in round 3. That's it for me.
So what a run here from Rick. So Corey Trice to the Bengals with that pick. Tank Bigsby, Jordan Battle, Andre Carter II, Keanu Benton, and Rashee Rice. Honestly, I don't mind a lot of those selections. I think those, like once you get to the second, third, and I think maybe to an extent the early part of the fourth round, which obviously we're not doing here. We're only going 3 rounds. You start to have a couple guys that mold in a little bit. And I think the guys, a lot of them that you pick there make sense. I would probably think a lot of people would argue is the Corey Trice selection because there are corners ranked higher above him that the Bengals could use. But I mean, who says the Bengals don't use both the second and the third round picks on corner or defensive back in general? So
again, I also think too that if you're talking about talent wise, you might talk about more. But I'm a guy that likes taller corners because I like that press coverage. And Trice is a linebacker, so I think he could tackle a guy in open space. I can't say that for a 5'9" guy who might miss a tackle here and there. So it's a bit of a risk because Clark Phillips is higher ranked, but I think Trice's frame lends a lot better for Bengal defense that needs a little physicality in the red zone.
Fair enough. All right, so. As you can see on the horizon, there's 2 Broncos picks back to back. So we'll get another Rick run here in a second. But before that, we get a little bit of a break with Justin here. Justin's actually going to sandwich those 2 selections because he's got the Cardinals here and he's got the Rams here. So Justin, with the 66th pick, you have the Arizona Cardinals. So just a recap for the people at home. Justin, with the 3rd overall pick in the draft, he went with Jalen Carter for the Cardinals early in the first round. And then in the second round, he continued with the defensive side of things. He continued on the defensive line. He went BJ Ojulari from LSU. So Justin's made a commitment so far to the Cardinals defense. Does that continue? Are we going at another position? Are we going to offense now? What are we doing, Justin?
Listen, I'm the man with a plan when it comes to the Cardinals, and that plan is to fix that defense. And I think that the next step that they would do is, even though I was tempted to take another pass rusher, I'm going to go with Keely Ringo out of Georgia. Big guy, fast. He's one of those guys that has all the physical tools to play in the league. It's just a matter of putting it together, and I think this is an excellent pick for them in the third round. Like I said, a little bit of a project maybe, but this is where you take guys like this, and I think he'll be an excellent fit for what they're going to want to do in Arizona.
I like it.
Yeah, I Ringo I know has kind of fallen a little bit. I'm not sure if he had a bad pro day or whatever the case was, but I mean, he's still an excellent talent. And if you get a third round guy from Georgia, fit your need, I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think he's a guy. He like you said, Rick. He's a guy that a lot of people, even still, are. I think some people are still projecting to probably go in the second round at least. So you get a guy like that. Again, you said it, Rick. Some people have to fall here, and sometimes it will be the players you don't expect. But you get a Keely. You get Ringo in the third round. That's not bad here.
That's really good.
That's not bad at all.
Really good. I have the Broncos. Yay me! I have the Broncos. One of the worst.
Who are you going to pick to help Mr. Unlimited?
One of the worst. I'm not picking a guy to help Mr. Unlimited with the first selection. I'll tell you that much. I'm picking a guy that does a need specifically, and it's a guy who's not getting a lot of traction. But let me tell you something. A 92.2 grade on PFF tells you something. And it fits one of their needs right away. At 67, Kobe Turner from Wake Forest on the defensive interior is going to go to Denver. I think that Kobe Turner is an outstanding athlete. He's a bit thin on the frame, and his arms are on the shorter side. They're only 32 inches, which if you think about Quentin Coples, sorry, Justin, for bringing him up, but that's kind of a similar mold and mindset. But in the third round with back-to-back picks, I think you can get away with it. So I would be tempted to go there. And you know what? Denver did draft a tight end last year, so I'm not going to pick Sam Laporta. But I'm going to look at this wide receiver room again, and I'm going to go draft his teammate. At 68, I'm going to say A.T. Perry from Wake Forest goes to the Broncos. They need another wide receiver, and especially if you're talking about them possibly trading Cortland Sutton, which I know we talked about last week. If you can get another guy there for Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, you get A.T. Perry in that room, who's a guy who's 6'3", runs really well, 1,100 yards, 81 catches last year on 130 targets, was always open, 11 touchdowns. And that Wake Forest team was pretty good last year too. So I think it does help Russell Wilson or the next quarterback that they're going to take, or even Jared Stidham when Russell Wilson decides to quit football and go make some more sandwiches at Subway, because we know that's what they're going to do. I think it's a decent selection for them, and it kind of helps them think about the future a little bit more.
Fair enough. I was considering A.T. Perry with one of my future selections coming up here, so not a bad pick there at all, to say the very least. Kobe Turner. No, I like that. When you're the Broncos, then Justin's going to have to deal with this because he's also picking for the 49ers and he's making a second Rams pick here. When you don't have a first-round pick, you kind of have to try to play your cards right. This is where your scouting department earns their money here. The second, third, and fourth round, even really, like, this is where your scouting department can really come through for you in terms of guys who are there. So I don't mind both those selections. I think Kobe Turner, someone I'll admit I haven't looked too much into him just overall, so I'll take your word on what you've said about him. Like, he's just a prospect that's just haven't taken an in-depth look at him.
Yeah.
All right. Justin, you have the Los Angeles Rams here with the 69th overall selection here. Nice. Earlier in the draft with the Rams at 36, you picked Mozzie Smith out of Michigan, so you added to the D-line. Are we going to stay with the defense here? Are we just going to churn out more defensive players here for the NFC West, or are we staying with the line here? Or are we going to the offensive side of things with the Rams? What are we doing?
I have really been all over defense lately, haven't I?
Yeah, you really have, dude.
Listen, I think it's a strong defensive draft, but that's not where I'm going here. I'm
not saying it's a bad thing, by the way. I'm just like it's funny to know how many.
It's the way this draft has fallen. I think the teams that I have would benefit from defensive additions, but that's not what I'm going to do here with the Los Angeles Rams. I'm going to go with Cody Mauch out of North Dakota State, a 3-year starter there. He's one of the higher rated tackles on the board for Pro Football Focus, and it's a need that the Chargers have. I think that they really need to work on that offensive line. At the very least, they need to work on their depth on the offensive line. And I thought about going running back here, but to me, they really need to protect Stafford before they go after that. They still have Cam Akers there. Maybe he can stay healthy. Maybe he won't. But this is the best move, I think, for them.
Yeah. I mean, the Chargers definitely would have liked him, but the Rams getting him, is a pretty good pick there as well.
Yeah. Yep.
So I don't mind that at all.
No.
All right. Back-to-back picks here. Raiders and Saints here on the clock for myself before we get to the dreaded 72nd pick for Justin, a.k.a. the Titans. So, I mean, it's funny, Justin, because I was telling you about the defensive side of things. I've also been someone who's had, teams that need the defense. The Raiders have been a team where I went defense with both my first two selections. I did go corner with Christian Gonzalez with their first-round pick, and then the second round, because he fell, Brian Brucey was the guy that I went with for them. So, I think we're kind of in the same boat in terms of where we've gone to, but I think I probably am going to start to look a little bit more to the offensive side of things. They have I don't know what the proper word to describe their tight end room is. It's a tight end room, to say the very least. They have the veteran Austin Hooper there. They have O.J. Howard is shown on the depth chart for me. So it's going to be interesting there. But I'm not necessarily – I feel so bad for Sam Laporta. He just keeps falling, and I don't think I'm going to pick him with this selection here. I'm probably going to end up going somewhere else. That somewhere else being the offensive side of the ball. Because while I do think the offensive line isn't necessarily the top of the priority, I still think they need to go through it. And look, at the end of the day, offensive line, what are things about the offensive line you need? You need a definitive strong center. And look, all due respect to Andre James out of UCLA there, let me make a positional upgrade, and James could go play the guard position. Let's go with John Michael Schmitz from the University of Minnesota there. I'm picking him for the Raiders. I think a strong center. I think he could actually even go higher than this. I think he's one of the guys. I think him and Mock, funny enough, back-to-back picks there. I think those are two guys that might get the Cole Strange effect. Not saying they'll become first-round picks, but I more so mean maybe go up in the second round, whereas they're being taken in the third round for our draft. But again, that's value, guys. That's how the game goes, and I think there's some great value selections right there. And back-to-back. So that was my pick for the Raiders. Now let me move on to my New Orleans Saints pick. So with the Saints, I went with Uzoma earlier on the edge, and I went with Avila with the guard spot. So I've attacked both sides of the ball here in terms of going after offensive and defensive line. So really it's all a matter of who else do I want to go with when it comes to the Saints. The Saints, again, they are an interesting team to me. I don't think, to some people, they are the early favorite to win the AFC South, NFC South, excuse me. But I don't think it's necessarily cut and dry. I still think there are things that the Saints team could use to improve. And ultimately, I mean, wide receiver, if I was a little bit more concerned about their wide receiver depth, I would. But I think Chris Olave is solid there. Michael Thomas is still questionable, so it's something to wonder about. And Alvin Kamara, hopefully he'll be able to play, at least if you're Saints fans, hopefully he'll be able to play. But you do still have Jamal Williams, who you got in free agency. So a lot of things you got to like there ultimately. But I think ultimately I'm going to end the slide for Adebawara here, and I'm going to pick him with the Saints because they need some youth along that defensive line. They've lost a couple guys who got 6-7 plus sacks during the offseason. Ironically, two of those guys going to the Falcons out of all teams. So I'm just going to end that slide for him right there. Get a young pass rusher in there that could help you add some youth there and maybe contribute early. I know for the Saints, young pass rushers, it's hit or miss for every Cam Jordan. You got to Marcus Davenport. So I know it's difficult, Saints fans, but just in the process here, let's go with Adebawara for the 71st overall pick. All right, things are going to head back to Justin here with a Tennessee Titans third round selection. Before they go back to Rick here, we're getting another Rick run with 3 in a row with the Texans, Browns, and Falcons after this selection. But first, the Titans of Tennessee. Justin, who are they going to be selecting here for you?
This is another one that I'm torn with. I've gone offense pretty heavily with the Titans, and I want to take another offensive player, but I am tempted to take Garrett Williams out of Syracuse. I think he would fit well for them. You know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go with the offense. I'm going to go with Sam Laporta. I think that he's going to be an excellent fit for what they try to do now. They could use that kind of over-the-top tight end that in the red zone that they used to have when they still had Delaney Walker. I'm going to go with Laporta.
And the slide finally ends.
It does. Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, Laporta out of Iowa was an excellent tight end, but, just the height and the variations that might fit other needs, I think would be better. served there. Texans, I think, in this spot, it's interesting because John Michael Schmitz would have been a really nice pick for them. I think that you can get away with trying to draft the center a little higher in this mold in this round here. So I'm gonna add another name to the first name team, and I'm gonna say that at 73 the Texans will go Juice Scruggs out of Penn State, the center. But he's also versatile. He's not just a center. He's a guy that can kind of play a lot of different positions on that offensive line. So I think on the interior side, I think he can be a really interesting guy that could fit in that mold there. The Cleveland Browns. Wow. Guys, thanks for joining the party. Finally, I picked 74. Took you long enough, didn't it?
Better late than never.
Sure, or never if you're the Browns, I guess. So Cleveland is interesting because they only have one need, which they call defensive interior, which I guess I can understand because you need to have somebody fit in this defensive line with Alex Wright and with Myles Garrett, but they did pick up Dalvin Tomlinson. So is it truly a need for them? I don't really know. I'm tempted to throw more wildness into this draft than pick Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the quarterback out of UCLA, just because I want to see the reactions here. But no, I'm not going to do that. I think that the Cleveland Browns in this entity here, I think what they're going to look to do would be to kind of go for that corner. And look, there's a big concern that I have with this pick that I'm about to make, but I think you can kind of get away with it because I think you might be able to give him a little bit more play. The problem with Garrett Williams is that if he doesn't have the right mentality and mindset, he's not going to play the game the way that you want him to play. But I think that a guy who's ranked as highly as with all the talent that he has, if he falls down to this pick and he goes to Cleveland at 74, which I have him going at, I think that it's going to help him kind of get that mojo back in a way. I don't know. He lost a lot of his campaign last year. He tore his ACL against Notre Dame, so he didn't really have the presence on the field that you would like. So maybe that has something to do with mentality. But if he stays healthy, he can be a top 10 corner in the league 5 years, 6 years down the line because he's got a lot of innate athletic ability that I think can really be stronger in that sense. And so then the Falcons. Now the Falcons haven't really added a weapon to say. And again, that might be because, again, we filled out the needs for them. Why they say wide receiver is a need for the Atlanta Falcons, and I tend to think so, but my thing with it is, Nathaniel Dell is 5'8". He's got excellent, control and speed, but I want somebody who's going to be able to catch the ball. And do you know there's a receiver on this board who has caught, out of 104 of what they call catchable targets, out of 104 tries, he's caught the ball 99 times out of 104 tries. I want catch rating, especially for a young quarterback like Desmond Ridder. Cedric Tillman out of Tennessee is the pick here for Atlanta at 75. It's not the Jalen Hyatt, but it's a more consistent guy. Think about it like, if there was a second for Odell Beckham Jr. You had Odell's flashiness with the Giants when he first came out, but then there's that second steady hand who can catch the ball for the 5-6 yard gain, the check down, whereas Beckham, you want going for the 20-yarder. That's the difference between Tillman and Hyatt. And I think for an Atlanta team that has Drake London and that has Scotty Miller and just added Matt Collins this year, putting Cedric Tillman in that room is another good fit for them. And I think it does well. It gives them an opportunity to have somebody who can catch the ball. Like I said, somebody who can go find the ball when Ridder throws it a little bit wide right. So
that nice little shot at the end there for Desmond Ridder.
Yep. Have some fun.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. Good picks overall there, I think. I think the Garrett Williams one is something worth noting there, Rick, because I think he is one of those guys that obviously injury just wrecks the kid to finish out his college career. And we could probably say it for a couple of these guys, but if he was healthy, I think the value of him would certainly go up, to say the very least, in terms of where he would have gone. Probably a first-round corner if he was fully healthy last year, or if not early second. All right, back to the Patriots for me. I have gone linebacker with them. I have gone with wide receiver with Jackson Smith-Njigba. So what to do with this team here? A couple of options. I think line is probably the way to go for this selection. I think you look at the offensive line there. You have the young guy in Cole Strange, but you have a couple veterans there and Trent Brown and Riley Reef, who kind of 50-50 on, honestly. Like, yes, it's nice to have the veteran presence of those two guys there, but at the same time, can you eventually find somebody else to eventually take the mold? And I think there is a interesting amount of tackle talent here left available. Maybe one of these guys would be technically an overdraft, but I think it would be worth it. But I'm actually going to go with what I think would be a Bill Belichick pick because I just went with a linebacker. Give me an edge rusher. I'm going to go with Nick Herbig out of Wisconsin. 20 sacks over the last 2 seasons. I know he's technically listed at linebacker, but I think he's way more of an edge rusher. Again, 20 sacks over the last 2 seasons. I think he'll be able to fit along the defensive line there. And again, sometimes you have to, I think sometimes in a mock you need to strike the balance between what pick makes sense and then the pick of for what you would do and what the team, what you're doing is going to do. I think this is a Bill Belichick. This screams a Bill Belichick selection, at least in my mind. First team All Big Ten last season. Again, 11 sacks last year's career year for himself. I think he like I said, first selection was a linebacker. I think now you get a young defensive lineman to add there to that team that just they need more youth. They need more youth, more talent. They need more youth that has good talent. Let me say it like that when it comes to the Patriots. And I just think I think the last 2 selections here beef up a defense that Belichick, for all intents and purposes, I know you could argue maybe the offense is the bigger need. I think they could find a way with the offense. I think they're probably going to be really relying on the defense to do it. And I think if you're going to rely on your defense to carry you, get some young, talented players to help out with that here. So I'm going with Herbig for the Pats at 76th overall. Lucky number 77. I'm just kidding there. I mean, 2 sevens, you never know. The Los Angeles Rams, again, it's just been all depth picks for the Rams. No first-round pick for them. But, I mean, I think Justin's done a pretty good job drafting for him. So, Justin, What are we going to do with the Rams here at 77?
I think we're going to start looking at some more offense for them. And to me, I think they need a receiver. I'm going to go with the guy that had a monster campaign last year, almost 1,400 yards. He had 17 touchdowns. I'm going to go with Nathaniel Dell out of Houston. He's a smaller guy. I think a lot of teams will have an issue with his height and weight, but this guy's a burner, and he's going to separate, and he's going to make plays for this team. I think he'll be an excellent complement to a guy like Cooper Kupp, and it's a guy that Matthew Stafford will love to find in the flat and running down the field. So let's go with Dell.
Yeah, like I said, my big issue with him was his height at 5'8". But I think if you can find a way to put him into the right system, I think it's really, really good fit. And I think he'll be really well in Los Angeles. I think he really would, because I think the Rams are going to be creative and try and work plays around him. I think that's an excellent pick there. 78, I'll go short, sweet, and to the point here. I don't like anybody that's safety on the Green Bay Packers currently. And so therefore, I want the most complete safety in this draft class. That's Jamie Robinson out of Florida State. He can play anywhere. He can play off-ball, coverage, in the box. He fits every mold. He is the best tackler safety in this class. He might not be the best athlete, but he's the best guy with the football awareness, I think. And look, Green Bay, you solved 2 problems there with wide receiver and tight end in your first 2 picks. So get a little better on the secondary side. So I think safety is a good pick for there. And Jamie Robinson's a really good player. So I think he's an excellent selection of that mindset.
Definitely someone I was personally looking at and hoping for to fall a little bit further, but Rick swipes him there for the Packers. And I was actually going to point it out, Rick, because it's funny with Justin picking the Dell pick, which I am a very big fan of, by the way, Justin. I think that was a great pick. I think with the Packers, you go after skill position in the first and second round, which when was the last time they've done that? Now you go back to the defense. I will say defensive line is there for a reason. I would have maybe considered with one of their picks a defensive lineman because I think they need the pass rush back there. I think, especially that, I think one bad injury to that defensive line just is good. When TJ Watt got hurt last year for the Steelers, their pass rush was dang near non-existent. I think that's going to be the case with the Packers. I think one bad injury to that defensive line, I think they're going to be non-existent. But I definitely see all your picks make sense, and I think Robinson there is a good selection there for safety, especially because they're probably going to need to hit a mini reset in that defense soon if they still have 1 or 2 big contracts left. So,
and I thought about defensive line too there, Jurgen, but I think that their linebacking core just makes up for their dearth at the defensive line, because if you've got Rashawn Gary back this year, fully healthy, Quay Walker, who had a great first year, Kingsley Enagbare as well, that's you can get away with running a 3-4 if your D line isn't as strong because your linebacking core is that fierce.
Fair enough. All right. We have a run of Justin here. We got 4 picks in a row for Justin.
Yay!
So we got Colts, Steelers, Lions, and Bucks. So let's go after the Indianapolis Colts first. Hell of a draft for the Colts here with what Justin's done. They got DeJuan Jones in the second round, of course, after getting Bryce Young, who fell to them at 4th overall. Probably not going to happen in real life, but, people can dream. With the Colts here at 79, Justin, who are you looking at to help? Are you going to keep at it with the offense, or are we going defense this time around?
No, I'm going to keep at it with the offense. I'm going to go Kayshon Boutte, wide receiver out of LSU. A guy who was a little bit disappointing last year after coming off ankle surgery. He had some production the year before, 9 touchdowns, about 500 yards. It's a guy who you thought would hopefully step forward in his 3rd year at LSU, but he didn't quite make that leap. Maybe we would attribute it to a disappointing year on offense for the entire team. So I think they take a risk there in the 3rd round. The Steelers, I'm going to go with Travius Hodges-Tomlinson out of TCU. He's a solid player. He had 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions last year. Again, their secondary needs guys that are going to keep the yardage short. I think that if they would have maybe had some guys to help them long-term towards the end of the game last year, they would have maybe been in for a playoff spot. The next guy I'm going to take for the Lions is going to be guard Chandler Zavala. I do think they still need some help on the offensive line. They've been building. They've been strong, especially since the addition of Penei Sewell. It doesn't hurt to have that depth. And this kid's a big kid at 6'5", 325 pounds. And last for the Lions, I think I'm going to go with a guy who he didn't have huge sack numbers, but he did get a lot of hurries and pressures in college, and that is Isaiah Fasaki out of Notre Dame. Well-rated guy. He's a big guy, 6'5", 264. He can really get after some guys, but I don't know if he's going to be an every-down player. But, hell, 3rd round, it might be worth having him, especially as some depth on an already pretty strong defensive line.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Again, once you get to the 3rd round, like this is the time where if you see a guy and you like his intangibles, you might as well just go for him. And I think Fasaki definitely makes a ton of sense there in regards to that kind of a pretty good fit. And again, this is a Tampa Bay team. You can do a lot of different things. you can do a lot of different things. I think you've gone with a pretty well-rounded group of selections here for your boys, Justin. So there's that. All right, Seahawks I have 3 picks in a row here. I'll start with Seahawks. So Seahawks, I've gone Tyree Wilson. I've gone Antonio Johnson for them. I've gone with Hendon Hooker. I've gone with Luke Weiper. So a pretty balanced effort in terms of what in terms of trying to go for this team. A little bit of offense, a little bit of defense, perfectly balanced, as all things should be. Man, really, really interesting here. I am going to go with. I talked about it. I know I went with safety for this team with the previous selection, but I still think a corner would be nice to add to this squad, relatively speaking, because I think at the end of the day, I just think Woolen had such a good season, and now I think it's time that you add a little bit more. Like you need that definitive potential number 2 guy to him. And I think you need that overall. So give me a guy who he's very good. He's actually pretty good at balancing himself between, the reading of the corner into what they could throw. He's a very good athlete. He's got great speed and I think change of quickness in terms of changing direction. So I'm going to run with DJ Turner with my selection here for the Seahawks with this pick here at 83. So that's going to be my selection there. The Miami Dolphins, I went with tight end with them earlier, and that filled the need. Offensive line is also a need for this team here potentially, so that's one thing to consider. Although I don't necessarily think it rules out what defense could be for the Dolphins. I think while the Dolphins, they've made heavy investments in the defensive side of the ball, this is a team that did fire their defensive coordinator. Now, they did hire the man, the myth, the legend himself, Vic Fangio, but I don't necessarily think that should take them out of the running in terms of trying to go after a defensive player. And when I look at this team relatively for the most part, there's some, I don't want to call it holes necessarily, but I think there are some things that they could do better. So I'm actually going to go with a guy who I think could just be a boon for them on the defensive side of the ball. I'm actually going to go with Trenton Simpson here, the linebacker out of Clemson for the Miami Dolphins. I think Simpson we taken a couple of his defensive line mates, funny enough, or not defensive line, I mean, but his defensive teammates earlier in the draft with Brian Breesy, with Murphy. I think Simpson is a good player. He's got good starting experience. He's played both inside and outside in his career. He's pretty good at reading his keys. He's got ideal traits in terms of being able to spy on mobile quarterbacks, which I think that's a big thing if you're playing against Josh Allen. I think overall he's actually pretty good in terms of being able to squeeze routes underneath. So ultimately speaking, Trenton Simpson, I think, could be a nice, I don't want to say jack of all trades. I think that would be a little bit too much, but I think you get a guy that's played both inside and outside from the linebacker position. I think that just adds depth to a Dolphins team that, I mean, you don't fire your defensive coordinator if your defense was good last season. So I'm going to add Trenton Simpson to the squad there. And then my last selection for now in this mini run that I have here, I have the Los Angeles Chargers. So I think with the Chargers, again, this is a team that they should be just a bona fide playoff team going forward. So going with tight end in the first round, going with corner in this round, could go a couple different ways here for them. I think with the Chargers, they're a bit of a tough team. I don't maybe tough isn't the proper word. I think there's a couple different ways to go with this team, and I think it is time. They have a great number 1 and 2, but we have seen this team lose guys over the last couple of seasons. Like, guys will get hurt, especially their top 2 wide receivers. I know Michael Williams has had a recent stretch here, but earlier in his career, he was suffering some injuries due to just early on. Like, Michael Williams' his first 2 seasons wasn't exactly looking like the most bona fide of picks, and then he really turned it on for himself here in the back half of things. So that's him. Keenan Allen as well, relatively good. I'm going to go with a guy who, again, maybe you'd consider this an overdraft, all things considered. But this is a guy with experience at the collegiate level. I think for the Chargers, when you're drafting a wide receiver, this guy doesn't necessarily need to be a bona fide day 1 starter. He just needs to help. A little bit of a different mold compared to his teammates. I'm going to go with Tyler Scott out of Cincinnati. Nearly 900 yards for himself this past season, 9 touchdowns. But the big thing, 2021 average receiving yards. Were you going to go with him, Rick?
Yes. Damn it.
There we go. I've stolen another one from him. But Tyler Scott, 2 years ago, it was 17.3 yards per reception, and last season it was 16.6. He could definitely make a couple plays. I don't think you'll necessarily need to worry about that with the Chargers because you have Keenan Allen and Michael Williams, but it is always nice to just have an extra option there for someone who could go deep. So give me Tyler Scott to the Los Angeles Chargers there at 85. Rick, Baltimore Ravens, what are you going to do?
Okay, so in lieu of that, Let me explain to you why I'm scared of Michael Wilson, first and foremost. I'm not picking him. He's only played 14 games in 3 years. Durability is a massive concern for me. And especially if you send him to the Ravens with how many injuries they've had over the past couple of years.
But by logic, he should go there.
No. Yeah, he should. You're right. I am going to go at 86 with a wide receiver for the Ravens. A guy who last year I picked David Bell, and I thought he would be a lot better than he has been, but I'm going to try and trust that again. Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State is going to go to the Ravens because you want to talk about a guy who's had nearly 3,000 yards receiving over the last 3 years. He's a guy who knows how to get the ball in his hand, and I think that they would be a great fit for them. It's a little bit of a reach, but the wide receiver room for Baltimore is loaded with talent. Getting a guy who's 6'2" in there like Hutchinson, who can find the way around. You pair him with a Beckham, a Duvernay, a Bateman, and then you have Mark Andrews there as well. Whoever the quarterback's going to be in Baltimore, they're going to have a fun time throwing the ball. Whoever it's going to be. I don't know who it's going to be. Do you know who it's going to be? Because I have no idea.
I hope it's not Lamar Jackson because I still don't think they deserve it.
I don't think so. I hope not.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I will say this, Rick, to with your selection there. Like, I think if you're the Ravens, yes, you've addressed the need at wide receiver a little bit in free agency. I don't think that should necessarily disqualify you from taking a wide receiver in any way, shape, or form, especially with a pick at 86. I think this is a case where you've got to go with the best player possible for yourself, best player available. And I don't. It is a reach, but I think again at this point you go with who you want, you go with who you like, you go with what you want. And I think if it shapes up and if the Ravens like Xavier Hutchinson more than some of the other guys, I'm with you. Michael Wilson was just a turnoff for me. Like Tyler Scott was definitively better. Like Michael Wilson, he's going to be a guy that drops, I think, to me considerably.
The beauty of Tyler Scott too, and this is something that I was going to bring up too if I had the opportunity to pick him, was that he's still learning the position of wide receiver. So you're right, he's not going to start for you day one. The fact of the matter is that if he's learning under Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, that's a gift for a young kid like him. I mean, he's a converted running back, so he can even learn how to catch a ball from Austin Eckler if he really wanted to. Yeah, as long as he's still in LA with the Chargers, question marks abound there. But it's one of those things too where I looked when I was doing my 3 rounds, I looked at the back end as like guys who had interesting stories too that I wanted to try and bring up as well. And Hutchinson's a guy who I've liked for years. I thought that he was always a very, very talented for them for years. And you know what, too? That's an indictment on Brock Purdy as well, to get Xavier Hutchinson the ball as often as he did. So, it's another win for Mr. Irrelevant from last year.
There we go. Just W's for Brock Purdy, even when he's not even involved in the draft. Always. All right. Minnesota Vikings here with the 87th overall pick.
Hi, Justin.
As Justin handles things in the background. With the Vikings for myself here, I'm going to go with a guy who I like the fact that he's still on the board. I think he had 10 sacks last season, 2 forced fumbles for himself. Went to a bit of a smaller school, but overall speaking, had a pretty good career for himself. Again, another guy who used the 5th year of eligibility very much to his advantage. I'm going to run with Carl Brooks out of Bowling Green.
Love him too.
Love him too. Great intangibles, 6'4", 300 pounds. Like, how can you not like a guy like that? And again, Minnesota, that defense needs to get younger. They need to add talent. And I think when you're Minnesota, who didn't have a 2nd-round pick in our draft, they only had that 1st-round pick, you need to hit on these picks, and you need to hit on guys that, even if it's not necessarily day one right away, that has the potential to contribute this season. I think Carl Brooks could be a 3rd-round steal for them.
Yeah, and Brooks would have been my guy at 88. So once again, you steal another one of my picks there. But but I'm okay because you know what? I'm gonna follow your lead and take another guy from a smaller school.
Rick's about to call Connecticut police on me for all the
I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna pick another guy from a smaller school, and he's a bit undersized at 6'2", 242, but another guy that I've really liked, and I think he'll fit a great need for Jacksonville, is Jose Ramirez, the edge out of Eastern Michigan. I'm going to pick him at 88. I think that, Jacksonville was a tackling force last year, and all you really have to do is get a guy who can rush the quarterback like Jose Ramirez can, and they can really disrupt a lot of things. I mean, he'll definitely hire for him, but I think it's a nice fit, and I think that he's a really solid player. Give him the opportunity because need some more action in Jacksonville, and that's what Jose Ramirez is going to provide.
I like it. I like the selection right there. Yeah. If you, I think if you're a team like the Jags, you have that selection right there. You go with who you want, and I think that's ultimately what the 3rd round is probably going to be for a lot of our selections here. It's like, who do you want? Who fits your scheme? Who are you falling in love with on your draft board? Things like that. All right. So for myself, I have the New York Football Giants here. Went wide receiver in the 1st round with Jordan Addison, then went linebacker with the kid out of Arkansas, Sanders, in the 2nd round. So interesting set of things I could do here. So we handle wide receiver, we handle linebacker, although I drafted a guy who basically could pass rush a little bit as well. Let's try to strengthen up the interior of the offensive line, just add a little bit of depth. I don't think you can necessarily say a bad thing. I love the fact that he's still here. Give me Andrew Voorhees, the guard out of USC, with my selection here. Voorhees is a guy who, like, I just talent. Like, I'm not saying he should be ranked higher. I think like where he's projected to go is about right. But I know when it comes to, he's, again, maybe one of these older guys. He's 24 years old. He was a 1st-team All-American last year, 1st-team All-Pac-12, and he ended up winning the Morris Trophy, which is specifically is awarded annually to the best offensive and defensive lineman in the conference as selected by opposing players. So his peers said that he was the best offensive lineman in the conference in Pac-12 football last year. Considering some of the guys that we've drafted, I think that's pretty good. So,
I'd say so. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah, I think the Giants could use a guy who's just going to help, whether it's Saquon or somebody else. I know maybe hindsight 2020, I would have liked to go running back if I could have with the Giants, but I'm hoping and assuming Saquon will be back there, and then you just get a guy who's going to help just run block for you. that right there. That's the little selection. So Andrew Voorhees for the Giants at 89. And now the rivals, they go. The NFC East divisional foes. Justin and the Dallas Cowboys. Who are we going with?
I have an idea of who he's going with.
It's got to be someone out of Texas.
It has to be.
Like, it's got to be a Texas state school.
Like maybe Texas A&M?
No, because you picked Bijan Robinson.
I know I was tricking you, but I am going to go with Derek Hall out of Auburn.
Oh,
I think that he is the guy that will seriously help their pass rush last year, which I think could have been better last year. They did lose some pieces in free agency. I'm going to go with Hall. He's a huge kid. I think he's got a lot of talent. He should be good there.
Yeah, I like it too. I know Jurgen's muted, but I like it too.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth so many times between so many tabs. I'm running a show around here. All right.
Of course.
No, I think that was a good pick. Hall. I was also considering Hall for my selection earlier when I ended up going with Carl Brooks. Like, I think those two and also the kid out of Missouri here, Isaiah McGuire, are just guys who around this range kind of makes sense for them to potentially go here. Okay, Buffalo Bills for me. I've gone running back. I've gone defensive back for them. So really with this third round pick, could go in a couple different selections. Again, I know Pro Football Focus is only listing one need. I don't know if it's not necessarily just one need that the Bills have, but it's certainly an interesting thing. AFC East divisional winner of the last couple seasons, a team that wants to go far. I think I referenced it earlier with one of my two selections for them. I forget which one I kind of referenced to, but I think the Bills are a team that, as talented as they are not without fault, and they need more there in terms of maybe where you think they're good. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of the depth that they have behind Stephon Diggs. I think they could use a little bit more talent. And my thing is, I'm not in love with this selection, but I think if you want to talk about a guy who the Bills could select, I think can refine this kid, I think if they can help refine his route running, I think it could be a dangerous selection. I'm going to go with Marvin Mims, the wide receiver out of Oklahoma. Again, I think Marvin Mims is talented. He's good. I think he's a solid pass catcher. It's just his route running, like, it's a generic thing that people say. It's like can run every route on the in the tree or whatever. He's actually not a guy whose route running tree is as refined as a lot of the other receivers in this draft class. I think you bring him in Buffalo, no pressure to immediately go there. Like, this is a team that it's going to rely on the running backs. It's going to rely on Josh Allen's legs. Stephon Diggs has a heavy load to carry. Gabe Davis is the number 2. I think he'll get an option here in year 1 to learn, and I think it's going to be a development year for Marvin Mims where it's not immediately go, it's take a step back, learn the offense, learn how this team goes. And hey, I mean, they've shown they can develop a quarterback. Why not help? And Gabe Davis has been solid. Why not try to develop another receiver here in Marvin Mims?
Yeah, I like Marvin Mims too. I think that's an excellent option for them too. So I'm at 92 now with the Bengals. And one of the things you guys mentioned earlier in the draft, and I had this little sneaky thing up my sleeve here just in case, was that should Jonah Williams not want to be in Cincinnati anymore, right? Let's talk about that for a second here. Well, all you have to do is go pick a 6'8" guy, build him up, make him beefier, a 6'8" guy who's got the best feet of any tackle in this draft, and make him your next star. I have Cincinnati taking Blake Freeland from BYU at number 92. I think this guy could be a superstar. I think like Braxton Jones last year, I had a higher grade on him than a lot of other people did. I think that he's a guy that could really become something. He needs to build up a little bit. He's only 302 pounds. He needs to beef up a little bit more. But at 6'8", the way that he plays and the way that he moves, like, there's not going to be very many guys who are going to be able to get around him that as quickly as you expect to. So I think that that's a great option for the Bengals to take here. And again, it's another name that I think might not get a lot of play, but I think that he's a very solid player.
I don't blame you. I think once you get to the 3rd and 4th round, I think offensive lineman selections are very much about the tools that they have. I think it's nice if there is a skill set, but I think just overall it's about the kind of like I literally just said it, the tools they have, the skills that they bring, and what can you work on and what you can develop. I mean, look, you're not going to tell me it's a bad idea to select a guy who's 6'8". you're just not going to do that. You know, you're not going to convince me of that. So I think it's a pretty good selection right there for the Bengals. And again, Rick, I'm with you. I think Jonah Williams, one of two things is going to happen. He's either going to ask out and he's going to get traded now, or they're just going to let him ride out the year and they're going to say, screw it, we're just going to keep you, help us win this year, and you could just go wherever the hell you want to go for a future season. Like I very much think that's probably going to be in the cards for the Bengals there. So getting it could be an insurance policy. You let this kid develop for 1 year and then you go, or do you trade Jonah Williams during the season? A lot of different routes you could take here. I think that's ultimately the key. So good stuff there. All right. I have the Carolina Panthers once again. I went quarterback with this team with the first overall pick, obviously. And then I went with Josh Downs from UNC with the pick in the second round. So now, very funny with a team like Carolina that, like, for being obviously they have to trade up for it. Not like all their picks very much high in each round, but that's not all these picks were originally theirs. Obviously, as you could tell on the little screen, this pick was from San Francisco via the CMC deal. So despite the fact, again, I'm not disagreeing that edge could definitely be a need for them. But I think Carolina, again, with adding Evero, I think defense, it's fine if it isn't at the top of your list. I don't think you necessarily have to go after the defensive side of the ball if you're Carolina. I'm not saying you can't. There are still some solid enough players here. I think KJ Henry not be a bad selection. Sidney Brown as well, although they kind of handled safety in the offseason. Clark Phillips III, I'm not going to lie, is very tempting here for the selection because I think another quarterback in the quarterback room necessarily would help. But I'm actually going to go with, and again, they have some veterans here. They did re-sign Bozeman, but I still think Christensen and Corbett, I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to put some pressure on those guys to have to perform. So I'm going to go with a offensive lineman here overall. I'm not just going to limit it to guards alone necessarily. I'm going to look after this. A bit of a reach in terms of where he's ranked here on PFF, but I was looking at this kid late in the process. I love the potential of what they could make him. I think they could turn this kid into something good. I'm going to go with Jalen Duncan out of Maryland. I think it's just a good selection. Again, developmental offensive lineman. Probably not going to play this season, honestly. But this is a case where if he ends up staying at tackle, maybe he could be the Taylor Moton replacement if Taylor Moton is not long for this team, or if you end up replacing one of the guards, he could shift to the guard spot. I think Jalen Duncan is a good selection here for the Carolina Panthers. I've made the jokes where, like, Justin's gone defense with some picks. I've gone defense with some picks. I think Carolina, offense. You need to reset things here for Frank Reich. Let's get him a quarterback, a receiver, and now an offensive lineman into the mold.
I agree. I mean, I also would have picked Nick Saldiveri out of Old Dominion because I think they're kind of the same player in that they're 6'6" guys. There are tackles that could be guards.
Yeah.
Which I think is a big key for them. And the Eagles do need a guard of that mold, but I also think that the offensive lineman can go a little bit later. Like Jackson Kirkland is a guard. He can go a little bit later, like the fifth round or for the fifth round here. So I'm going to make a reach pick, but it's a story-based pick. So if you'll allow me to, I'll tell you a bit of a story about this player. We've drafted his teammate back at number 10. And this is a guy who was born in Rome, Italy, and only played 1 year of high school football in Italy before coming over to the United States. He's a 6'7" guy who has a lot of potential to him, or a 6'4" guy rather, who's got a lot of potential to him. And I think that honestly, he's a guy that if you give him the opportunity, he's ranked very low on this board. If you give him the opportunity to be a star, he'll be a star. His name is Habakkuk Baldonado. He's an edge from Pittsburgh. And I think that if you pair him with Kalijah Kancey, who they drafted number 10, you put the two teammates together, he's still very low. So keep going, Jerk. I don't know why he's ranked this low, but if you give him the opportunity to, I think that he will be a guy that could potentially become, a good third, every other down back, every other down edge. And I think that the Eagles, they might need an offensive lineman. But again, Cam Jurgens is there. They've got a lot of, other players that are there. Jason Kelsey's still on 1 year. This might be a year you let the older guys ride it out and then bring in a newer guy next year. So I want to try and get a project in here and maybe make things a little bit different for them. And that's my pick at 94. I also have 95 too, but I think, like I said, the story of Baldonado is just really, really great. And it's one of those things where it's a really fun thing. Kansas City, I've done you wrong, obviously, in the first round. I tried to reap the benefits in the second round. Let's just go completely insane here in the third round.
Why?
Tyjae Spears of Tulane to the Kansas City Chiefs. Because if you want to talk about a guy who, I know they have Isaiah Pacheco, and I know they have, CEH, but if you can get a guy like Ty Spears who can be a kick return monster and a nightmare, as well as being a decent change of pace running back, if you can work on his catching ability, he could be an absolute nightmare for some of these defenses. And let me just say this too. I think a little bit, there's a guy I picked the last year around the stage who was, what's his name? Marcus Jones. Does that name ring a bell with you, Justin? Marcus Jones at all?
No, never heard of
Returned a punt return for a touchdown for the Patriots against the Jets. Broke our hearts back when I was a Jets fan. So this is a guy who, like, in this stage, you're looking for electricity, I think. And I think that Ty Spears can provide that electricity there. I think it's an interesting little selection there for the Chiefs. And hopefully something that, Pat Mahomes can turn into a 1,000-yard receiver, or, he can have like 2 or 3 kick return touchdowns like Naheem Hines did. So
I don't think, like, you made me think you were going to go really, really off the board for the Chiefs. I actually think that's not a bad selection because I think at this point for Kansas City, running back is just a freaking, like, conveyor belt. It's like,
it is.
You Clyde Edwards-Helaire probably not going to be on the team anymore. Might as well bring another running back in there. I actually like Tyjae Spears a lot.
Watching him play in the Cotton Bowl against USC for Tulane was a joy because he ran all over the field. It was great.
He's a big part of that comeback.
Yes, he was.
So, yeah, I don't mind that selection at all. Justin, Cardinals, you've gone a whole lot of defense. What are we doing?
I have done a whole lot of defense. I think it's about time we address that offensive line. And can you guys do me a favor? What's the name of the center out of Michigan?
Hold on. I'll tell you. Olusegun Oluwatimi.
I didn't even want to try because I did not want to do this kid disservice. He has been an excellent player for Michigan. He's a 3-year starter again. It's obviously what I've valued a lot in this draft. I think it's a solid guy that will really be an anchor to the center of that offensive line and will hopefully play with Kyler Murray for years to come. So that guy.
Yeah, I don't blame you, Justin. I'm kind of in the same mold as you where I think in the later rounds you need to look at guys who've been at schools for multiple years and have a history of success. I think especially offensive line is a position where you hope for a track record there of success. Like I feel like in terms of positions where you're cool with a player being like a one and done year, like if they were a 1-year wonder in terms of when they finally got their shot. I don't really think offensive, like I can't think, at least not off the top of my head, I can't think of offensive linemen that only started for a year and then went to the draft and got drafted like pretty highly. Like I think most offensive linemen have to be there at least 2 years to get some consideration. So good pick. All right. Washington Commanders. No. Okay. With this team, it's certainly interesting to say the very least. You can. I've gone with offensive line, which I very much stand by. Linebacker, I'm considering here, but again, I think for the future that offensive line needs tooling. And if Sam Howell is your guy for the future, or even if you are bad this season, Rick's Commanders might bottom out this year, and they'll try to go for their quarterback of the future next season. At the end of the day, get the hat. Or yes, I know you're a Bears fan, but you stuck up for the Commanders last season. They'll probably be your NFC East team. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to continue to go after the offensive line. So I'm going to. I mean, Rick mentioned it earlier. I have. Oh no, excuse me. He's listed as a tackle here. I'm going to go after a guy who is very similar to Jalen Duncan. So I'm going to go with him again. Let's go with my boy out of Old Dominion, Nick Saldiveri. Or Saldiveri. I may have botched the end of his last name, but we go with him again. Project guy, but 6'6", like could play tackle, could play guard. I think that's the value here for the Commanders. I don't see any offensive lineman on that team as irreplaceable. I just don't. So that's why I'm going with that selection there.
So now we come to the Browns. And we come to my final pick in the mock draft. And wow, what a fun 3.5 hours it's been, gentlemen. It really has been a great time here. So I want to leave you with some more laughs, if you will, because this pick is a compensatory pick. You know me. It doesn't really even matter. The Browns are going to pick whoever they want to pick here. So I'm going to enter into the greatest name in all of college football, joining the Cleveland Browns with the number 98 pick here. The linebacker out of Arkansas, towards the very bottom of the linebacker class, the Cleveland Browns select Bumper Pool out of Arkansas.
Why?
Because it's a Browns thing to do to pick a guy based on his name.
I I mean, look, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was at least ACC defensive
They
player
also
of
have
the year,
Sione
man.
Takitaki. So Takitaki, Owusu-Koramoah, and Pumperpool. Why not? But in all seriousness, the guy had a really good junior season. He was 90, 91 tackles on the year. Regressed a bit last year, but that's also because Drew Sanders was a much better linebacker than him. But he's still a talented linebacker who could probably fit a roster spot. You know, he might not be your every down guy, but he could turn into the next Matthew Slater as one of the best special teams players in all of football. And, you know, we're looking back on this saying, you know, why not? But, I mean, I think it's a case where you bring in a guy who regressed a bit last year, see what he is, see what he truly is all about. And, again, you picked his buddy, so let's give him a shout and see what happens here.
I mean, in theory, fair enough, but there was a lot of sarcasm that went into that selection right there, Rick. There was a lot of it.
Well, no, I mean, I did also have facts to back it up, but I wanted to just get the bumper pool reference in there too, so it worked pretty good for me.
Fair enough. I do appreciate it. Justin, 3 of the last 4 selections belong to you in this draft, where I break into it a little bit. So before I go my Raiders pick, you use your first 49ers pick, 99 overall.
Wow.
All right. I'm going to go with the guy that I joked about before, but I think will be an excellent fit in that Niner system, Devon Achane. Smaller guy, but has great first break quickness, and the Niners love a guy that could hit a hole and break free. So I think he'll be a great fit there.
You broke up a little bit. That's why I was thinking about it for a second. But once you mentioned going through it, I'm like, okay, Devon Achane. All right, cool. All right, Raiders. The last selection, the last team for me. This is my last pick here. And I've gone defense with them twice with Brees and Gonzalez. I went offensive line center with Schmitz earlier. And so I'm looking at this team. You know what's funny? Even with all the selections I've made to help them out at those positions, I could still argue the idea of going double dipping with any of those spots again. You could double dip on the D line. You could double dip with offensive line there. You can double dip with defensive back, and I'm considering going defensive back here. At the same time, you look at a couple things. Their backup quarterback is not a surprise, Brian Hoyer. So there's that. But I think with this Raiders team, I think behind Josh Jacobs is Amir Abdullah and Zamir White, and that's just not enough there for me to fully be confident in what they could do if Josh Jacobs were to hold out, or I think they still need a running back too. So this is where our boy finally gets drafted. Kendre Miller out of TCU will be my last selection that I make here. I think just, again, you're at this point of the draft, you look at your team and you say, what are we good at? What could use a little bit more talent in the room? And I just don't see enough talent behind Josh Jacobs in that room for me to be confident. Kendre Miller, 17 rushing touchdowns last season, just literally a hair under 1,400 rushing yards. He had 1,399, so pretty good. And not so much of a pass catcher. I would like to see if maybe they could try to develop that out of him, but he did have a receiving touchdown during his junior season, or was it his junior season? No, it was during his sophomore seasons. And then last season, he's gotten at least over 100 receiving yards before. Maybe they could try to clean that up, but for the most part, like him and Josh Jacobs, just run through everything. Just run through the wall. Punch a hole through the wall for Josh McDaniels. So, Kendre Miller's my last pick. Justin, the draft ends with you.
Take us home.
Literally.
All right, I'm not going to be fancy. I'm not going to do anything crazy here. I'm going to go with Anthony Johnson Jr. out of Iowa State and Clark Phillips III out of Utah. Just some secondary help to help a already really strong defense. They needed some help in the secondary towards the end last year. Depth is where they'll go right here.
Just writing these down, and then I will make these selections official. Clark Phillips III. All right. And there is our mock draft. It's not going to do anything. It's going to say that we have to pay for it. So, no free sponsorships here.
No, thank you.
Not at all. So, ladies and gentlemen, over the last 3 hours, really technically 3 hours because, we started with talking about other stuff. We had some games. So over the last, I say 3 hours and 15 minutes or so, that was the Sports Agents of Chaos 3-round 2023 NFL mock draft. I completely botched the order of that, but at the end of the day, that's along the lines of what we ended up doing here. So that was good. Boys, our second mock draft in the books. Look at that. And none of us dropped out due to bad network connection on this one.
I mean, it was close, but no, I think
It was close.
we survived. We survived. Yay.
Hey, sometimes survive in advance, boys. Survive
Absolutely.
in advance.
That's all it is.
So 3-round mock, obviously, for any of you that watch any portion of this live and that will go back and watch any of this, I would just like to say we do very much appreciate it. Mocks are always a slog to go through. Me and Justin went through one earlier this week, and it was just one round, and it took a little bit of time. So
I don't think it took this long, but
no, obviously not this long because we only did the one round, but at the same time, 3+ hours for 3 rounds. I mean, 102 selections in 3 hours. That's about around an hour.
Solid enough, yeah.
Give or take. I think if we ever push 4.5 hours, I think we need to reconsider the 3 round.
We need to really rethink, or we spent an hour waxing poetic because I took a punter on the first pick overall. So
As someone's phone goes off, I think that's the perfect.
Yeah.
Which one are you? Is it? Okay, that's always Justin.
Who's there?
Jesus.
Oh, there goes Xfinity.
All right, God dang it,
no.
Justin. No, does he have?
No.
I thought he had.
And you're muted.
I thought he had Spectrum. I thought Justin had
no.
Spectrum. Or am I confusing him with someone? No. Anyways, it's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, thank you so much for joining us here on the Sports Agents of Chaos 2023 NFL 3-round mock draft. A lot of selections here, obviously. A lot to go through. Will these picks be right? Who knows?
Probably not, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think, like last year, we pointed out a lot of guys that they may not have necessarily went where we thought they would go, but they ended up being drafted, and they were pretty good, pretty valuable for the most part of where we thought they would go. So we'll see that. A lot of the names that we selected here, will we take credit for this time next year? For sure.
Probably.
During the 2023 season. But at the end of the day, Rick, I like to say we did a good job.
I think so. I mean, aside from the obvious hiccup at the end of the first round there, but I mean, other than that, I think we did a good enough job. So
I think you and me caused plenty of chaos, to say the very least.
Always.
And so that ends it all. No red podium, ladies and gentlemen. Don't worry, you will get a red podium next week or the week after, whenever. Yeah, whatever. Well, I think you did a red podium via video, Rick. The next big thing will be you doing one in person again. It's been a little bit since then.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's very true.
As the people wait for that, we're not going to get one this week because it probably let you all go. But thank you all so much for joining us this week. This weekend on the Sports Agents Chaos podcast, the 3-hour mock is set, done, and complete. What are we going to talk about next week? Probably a little bit of the draft, probably a little bit of other stuff. We'll see. We'll make that itinerary and let you all know. But guys, thanks so much for joining us this week. Fun football chaos. That's the tagline of the show. And we will see you guys next week.